came in a big van.
I guess. Big bicycle.
Can you do me a favor?
Yeah, I am. Tell her to come up to the podium. She's in the back and there at
Great. Never mind. I got it. Right here.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Albany City Council meeting for May 20th, 2019. I would like to tell you that there has not been a coup this evening. Mayor Nason is not feeling well and is not able to be with us tonight. Please join Councilmember Pilch in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please note we use the original version without the phrase "under God."
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Barnes?
Present.
Councilmember Moss?
Here.
Councilmember Pilch?
Here.
Vice Mayor McQuaid?
Here. Ceremonial matters, certificate of recognition, Stephanie Sala as Toy Retailer of the Year. Stephanie, could you please come up to the podium and meet Councilmember Moss?
Congratulations. Let me read it. I might say a few words. This is in recognition of receiving the Toy Retailer of the Year Award by the Western Toy and Hobby Representatives Association.
Thank you so much. It's really wonderful to feel so loved by and so embraced by the community, which I love so much. So thank you for letting me do what I do. I have a lot of fun, providing great toys for all of the kids in town, and just appreciate being supported by all of you. So thank you.
3-2, the CERT graduation. Firefighter Rob, could you come up, please?
Good evening. Thank you, and good evening to Mayor Nason. I hope you're healing fast as we speak. Thank you, council, city staff, and everyone here tonight, and the spring 2019 Albany CERT team. As we've seen recently, disasters can happen up in Butte, Santa Rosa, and Paradise. When these disasters happen quickly, if you're not prepared, there can be a lot of suffering and damage done. With CERT members trained in our city here in Albany, it's going to make us a more resilient and safer city. So the Red Cross basically has said that we need to be prepared for 7 to 10 days on our own. That's food, water, shelter, medicines, and it's really important that we understand how to keep ourselves safe when the city as we're gearing up, and your public safety and your fire department are putting out fires and making sure that the streets are safe, you might have to be taking care of yourselves and your family for 7 to 10 days. So the CERT grads, again, for this spring 2019, volunteered 24 hours over 8 weeks to learn how to assist their families, themselves, and their community in the case of a wide-scale disaster. Some of the things they learned were how to prepare for disasters, how to put out small fires, triage and treat injured patients, how to search and rescue buildings safely, how to communicate with each other, and how to help themselves and injured patients who might be emotionally suffering. So there's a couple quick thank yous I want to say. I want to say thank you to the Alameda County Sheriff's Department who helped fund this program, FEMA, the fire department through Lance Calkins, who gave the time and energy and effort to help this program go through. I want to thank the fire department staff who would help out every Tuesday to make this thing happen. Also, I want to thank Vice Mayor Peggy for all her fantastic photographs. Jeremy Allen, who did a great job taking pictures and recording video of our final CERT disaster day. Bill Springer, who helped put on the CERT program this year. The Berkeley Moulage people, all the volunteer victims who helped out on our final day. Our PIO, Claire Griffin, and Lizzie, who helped out a whole bunch. Put on this group today. Our neighbor preparedness guru, Sid Schoenfeld, and Raymond Yee, who is helping put together the continual CERT program once the class is done. So thank you very much. And also thank you to the families who gave up their loved ones for 24 hours over the past 2 months. Well done. Thank you very much. So I got a couple quick certificates to hand out, and my Lieutenant James Berry will give you a CERT pin too. You can put it on your backpack, and now you are an official CERT graduate. No one can doubt you ever again. Oh, ready to go. Okay, so here's a quick couple minute long, 2.5 minute, awesome. So this is what the CERT folks did on the final day. They took all their skills that they learned, how to put out fires, how to moolah, or how to treat injured patients, how to lift heavy stuff. So this is kind of the last skills day all together, and this is Jeremy Allen's fine handiwork. It's Tuesday evening, April 30th, 2024. The 5-year anniversary of your CERT class. You are all doing various usual activities, cooking dinner, homework with the kids, reading a book, designing a supercomputer. Flash lightning, rolling thunder, and heavy rain continue from yesterday. Suddenly, an 8.2 earthquake rocks the Hayward fault line. The epicenter is in Berkeley. Widespread outages are reported with power lines down all over the Albany streets. Word of mouth spreads that structures have fallen throughout the Bay Area, and emergency services are responding to critical calls and are unavailable to immediately assist your team of approximately 12 members from the spring class of 2019 have consciously trained together with periodic refresher classes, block parties, and other activities over the past several years. Your knowledge and skills will be put to the test tonight. After assuring your personal safety, your family's safety, and your neighbor's safety, you all fight through the gale-force winds and heavy rains and meet at the corner of Solano and Evelyn to meet up with your area's incident commander, team leader. At the command post, the IC asks your team to enter the gym at Cornell School, as there are reports of people that were in the structure. She asks that you perform the following activities: rescue, triage and treatment, small fire extinguishment, and victim extrication. The IC suggests that one member of the group be the operation team leader. There's many ways to coordinate your effort. There is no perfect way, but some ways work better than others. Communication within the team is critical. If one of the groups should perform their task before the other groups finish theirs, they should check in with the operations leader to get reassigned to a task that may need additional assistance. If there are complications, as there always are, remember to problem solve and include your operations leader. Try your best to imagine that this is a real event and have fun. All right, very good. So there's there's other graduations going on. I guess Berkeley had a graduation. Other people are doing other stuff. But for the people who are here from the CERT graduating class of the spring 2019, thank you so much. And I'd like to give you a certificate, a hearty handshake, and a pin from James, and a handshake from Vice Mayor Peggy. So first, please, John Baldwin. And Albany's own Shelley Putzer. Kevin Pope. Brian Martin. Elam Day Friedland. I believe that's everyone that was in the class. And here's a special one for William Springer, who helped out run the class again this season. Thank you, Bill. So thanks again for the council and the city staff to prioritize our disaster preparedness in the city of Albany. I can't say how important it is, because when a disaster strikes, it's going to be all you guys helping us out, make sure everyone's safe and sound. Thank you so much.
We had no closed session this evening, so there's no report, which brings us to consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. By approval of the consent calendar, the staff recommendations will be adopted unless otherwise modified by the City Council. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or a member of the audience requests removal of the items from the consent calendar. Does any council member wish to pull an item? No. Does any member of the public wish to pull an item? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Barnes?
Yes.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuaid?
Yes, the motion carries. Brings us to good of the city. Good of the city is a time for persons desiring to address the City Council on an item that is not on the agenda. Please note that city policy limits each speaker to 3 minutes. The Brown Act limits the council's ability to take and/or discuss items that are not on the agenda. Therefore, such items are normally referred to staff for comment or to a future agenda item. And I see we have one speaker. We have other speakers
Yes.
for that? Okay. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to say that Jeff Bond did a great job. He testified in the lawsuit between the East Bay Regional Park District and Golden Gate Fields on valuation and on putting the Bay Trail across Golden Gate Fields property and the dune restoration and expansion. Golden Gate Fields wanted the public to pay $13 million for 2.88 acres of dune expansion, and the basic position of the Park District was $2 million. Jeff was great. He testified as to the processes in the city. I had a chance to be an expert witness, and a couple of other people testified. The jury came in $2,125,000, saving the public $11 million.
Great. Thank you. And could you read the names, please?
Yeah. Jacqueline Armstrong, Preston Jordan, and Jeremiah.
Hey, greetings. I'm Jackie Armstrong. I live at 759 Pierce Street. I'm 84 years old. I've lived there all my life. I was so disappointed that you all voted for the high-rise and 60-unit, 60 parking place on part of Peggy Thompson's Pierce Street Park. The park originally ran from Pierce Street to Washington to Cleveland. We worked on it 21 years. The park is in my neighborhood. And our neighborhood never had a park. We never had a community park like other neighborhoods in Albany, and we had the largest population in West Albany. We had the high rise. Many people live there. No park. It's the largest park in Albany in West, anyway, we had no park in Albany in our area until we negotiated and got the Pierce Street Park, and it's 4.5 acres. Federal government says a neighborhood our size, our park should be 4.5 acres. It should be available for people to walk to. I don't know if you remember, but when we negotiated for the park after 21 years, they did a test on the air, and the quality was very bad air. And they recommend no vegetables and no active sport games, something quiet for children, walking trails, bike trail, trees, picnic areas, lots and lots of trees. I called a forester in the mountains who talked about trees, and he's recommend we plant as many trees as possible because the air is so bad that the toxic air will go to the bark and the green leaves will produce new oxygen. So my plan was to put a lot of trees, particularly on 4.5 acres from one end to the other. I recall reading a memo to Caltrans, I believe it was by the manager of our city of Albany, stating the land is not suitable for housing, only suitable for parkland. I recommend that you take 1 acre from another park in Albany, the largest park, Memorial Park, and you build your unit there. It's close to BART, it's close to the Plaza, it's close to Solano, and it has many wonderful things. It has the pool, it has the basketball, it has play area. And that part of Albany has many parks. They have the green park in front of, strip in front of Albany High School. They have the green under the BART. We only have 4.5 acres in West Albany. Thank you so much for listening to me. I'm very disappointed.
Thank you.
Good evening, Vice Mayor, Council, Preston Jordan, and I thought I would take the opportunity to answer some of the Vice Mayor's questions on an item from 2 weeks ago from your meeting. This regarded Street Saver, which is the software that MTC designs and puts out, and all jurisdictions in the Bay Area use to help design their pavement management plans. And you asked if other jurisdictions, well, I think your first question is, has anybody talked to MTC? As an individual, not as a representative of Albany, but before I was appointed to the Traffic and Safety Commission, I had meetings with a number of MTC staff members, and some of them see an issue and want to resolve it, and others don't. So like any organization of that size, opinions vary, which suggested that some policy direction from elected officials would be useful. As far as other jurisdictions, I've been communicating with AC Transit Director Chris Peoples. He has asked AC Transit staff to bring this issue to the board. The issue for AC Transit is that when their buses hit potholes, they can and do cause injuries to passengers, and they do end up making payments to those passengers due to those injuries. So there's a very direct nexus of pavement management, mismanagement, and risk for AC Transit. And Street Saver takes no account of where buses go or where trucks go, and yet those heavy vehicles are shown by engineering to have orders of magnitude more effect in terms of damaging pavement than other vehicles do. I'd be happy to talk with you more about this outside of me if you like.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeremiah?
Are there any other public comments? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on. Item 7. Oh, I'm sorry.
I called your name.
Hi, my name is Jeremiah. I don't know if you heard that already. So there was a pedestrian killed. I still haven't got the results, whether it was a kid or an adult, but it was between noon and 1 o'clock in Solano and I believe Jackson. Yeah, and there was a crossing guard. Actually, I talked to the Albany police, and there was a crossing guard on duty. It's sad you could have a crossing guard on duty and still someone dies at that intersection. I've actually witnessed that crossing guard sitting in his car while people cross the street. I've witnessed that crossing guard only standing on the north side of Solano, which is the wrong side of the street when you're trying to cross kids coming from school to get to Albany Hill. So I made this at the Dollar Tree. It only cost me $2. And I'm going to put a bunch of these at that intersection so kids and people could feel free to walk safely on the intersection. There's something similar at the Circle pub area in Kensington. The Circle, they have little walking sticks. So I'm trying to do something like that. So this is very inexpensive, and this is my example. And these, I'll bet, make it better. These corners are soft, so it's harmless for kids. It can only help them cross safely. I'm trying to think of solutions. What is the city's solutions? You haven't even put a speed bump. You haven't even done a speed control automated thing since the death. What have you done? I don't know, you guys need to do a speed study between San Pablo and Jackson on Solano. Cars drive so fast through there. You got to witness it yourself or get that speed study. It's sad it takes someone to die to change something, but guess what? Someone died, you still haven't changed anything. I don't know if it was a kid, somebody. And about my RV on San Pablo, I'm going to leave it there. I'll keep paying your parking tickets, but I'm not moving. Some sanctuary city, you call this, right? You develop a municipal code to where I can't have a roof over my head. You'd rather be homeless on the streets, sleeping in a tent. Is that what you want for your citizens? You guys are creating more homeless by creating a municipal code saying people can't park their RV in Albany. And Berkeley's doing the same thing. You're creating more homeless. You know how trashy that homeless, those tarps and those tents look? I'll tell you what, RVs lined up, it's a lot cleaner. There's toilets for these people to go to the bathroom. In their RV, there's toilets. There's no toilets for tents. So you'd rather there be homeless people, so you got to clean up after them, or have people in RVs. So you think you need to please amend that municipal code. Thank you.
Thank you.
Instead of creating more homeless.
Any other public comment? Okay, let's move to item 7. Council member reports on meetings attended, announcements of future meetings, city manager report. Councilmember Pilch, we'll start with you.
Sure. I was at the League of Women Voters spring meeting where Mayor Nason was in a panel talking about diversity issues. It's a great event. I helped out at Bike to Work Day at Masonic and Marin, along with the Vice Mayor and perhaps others, not sure. And I attended the last EBCE meeting. Mostly it was dedicated to an update on PG&E rate setting. PG&E set their rates and they raised their rates, which is bad news for ratepayers, good news for EBCE as an organization because it gets more revenue and can fund more programs. But PG&E is due to revise their rates in July again, and we don't know what's going to happen. So it's kind of crazy times in the electricity world. And finally, I rode in the city's sponsored Bike About Town this past Friday. That's it.
Thank you. Councilmember Barnes? Councilmember Pilt, or I'm sorry, Moss, whoever you are.
Please.
I'm new at this, give me a break.
Yes, 2 meetings of note. One on the 8th, the mayor's monthly meeting in Hayward with Vice Mayor McQuaid, where we got updated on what's going on with the county district attorney, Nancy O'Malley. and then the next day, a programs and administration meeting for the Waste Management Board, where there was a discussion on the household hazardous waste fee and also of single-use foodware items.
Great. And we had our first business resiliency workshops a couple of weeks ago with the fire department, the Solano Avenue Association, the Chamber of City Staff. I participated in the CERT. They did a special workshop training on burn first aid and putting out fires. Mayor Nason and I attended the Alta Bates meeting. Today I met with the new Albany librarian. And also last Saturday, the Albany Rotary Club planted a tree at Peggy Thompson Pierce Street Park, which Park and Rec and the council approved. The tree is in memory of Marla Stevenson. And City Manager report, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Vice Mayor. Update on Community Emergency Response Team. We had the graduation here this evening, and we will have a workshop for the CERT team, Community Prepares for Disaster, today and tomorrow. It will be on Wednesday, May 29th from 7 to 8:30 in our EOC. Please join in the discussion on emergency preparedness. It's also Bike Month. The month is almost over, but thank you for those who participated, including Councilmember Pilch in the Bike About Town. The next one will be on June 14th. We also have a Bike-In movie night this Friday, and we will be featuring Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Should be a fun evening at the community center, so please join us and celebrate Bike Month. Also, Thursday, May 30th, we have Sporty Shorts Play Like a Girl movie night. It's actually sold out, but you can still get on the wait list for free tickets. That's at the Albany Twin. And then on Sunday, June 2nd, we have a decathlon in the City of Albany presenting Play Like a Girl, where more than 20 different sports will be on hand for girls ages 2 to 17 to try out and get a feel for different sports. The Arts Committee's now accepting applications for the 2020 Community Center Foyer Gallery, and currently the deadline for that is August 20th. You can visit our website, albanyca.org/arts to apply. Currently, the gallery showing is Song Cycle, and that runs through July 8th. Our Public Works Department is extremely busy, and I prepare everyone that uses the City of Albany to either live, work, or play that the summer will be a busy time. And it's positive because we're improving our utilities and infrastructure. It can be a little annoying as you're trying to get through the streets, so bear with us. We're doing a major sewer replacement along Solano Avenue, and I really appreciate the assistance of our business partners, including the Solano Avenue Association, for helping inform our community about this project. There's also a lot of paving going on around town. We have quite a few potholes, and we have a contractor working very hard to fill those. It's been quite a rainy season. We will also have sealing on several streets in Albany. Please check our website for updates on that. But the blocks include Adams, Carmel, Curtis, Garfield, Keynes, Madison, Pierce, Pomona, Portland, Ramona, San Carlos, San Gabriel, Solano, Stanage, Talbot, and Taylor. So as you can see, we have quite a lot of work planned. There's also an East Bay Mud Waterline project that's continuing on Santa Fe and Ramona. They will now be doing the paving work. So those of you that drive in that section of town and bump over the road, hopefully that'll smooth out soon. We're also renovating Memorial Park bathroom. That is just about done. We expect it to be done hopefully by the end of May. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to item 8-1, review of advisory body work plans. We'll start with the economic development. May we have a staff report, please?
Good evening, Council. Tonight before you is the continuation of the two-year work plan presentations. You'll be receiving presentation from the Economic Development Committee, Climate Action Committee, and the Social and Economic Justice Commission. There'll be a few more advisory work plan to follow at the next council meeting. Staff recommendation tonight is for the council to review the work plan presented tonight and to provide any comments or direction on the work plans and approve the work plans. We have the members of the advisory bodies here. We will start with the Economic Development Committee members, Alan Kane and Robert Chasty.
Good evening, Vice Mayor and Council. I'll be Robert Chasty, appearing for the Economic Development Advisory Committee. So we have a couple of things. I know you've received the report, so I won't go over the report line by line, but I will say a couple of things omitted from the report. One is that, to begin with, the Advisory Committee commended the work of staff and the consultants on the street plan for Solano. There are a lot of good things in it. But overall, I think that because of some late-breaking ideas and suggestions, we felt that the city might tap the brakes on the process and make sure that we have the best ideas and we vetted them in a robust process. Two things about that. One is, even though it seems like we could just go ahead with the plan.
Robert, excuse me. Could you give those comments when we get to that item and right now focus on your work plan?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were talking about the Solano plan.
No, right now we're talking about your Economic Development Committee work plan.
Which I don't have in front of me. Thank you.
You and Jeff, the great team.
So as you know, the purpose of the committee is to advise the council about the economic development in the city. And we have a few things that we're doing. Recent initiatives and accomplishments, we supported and oversaw the preparation of the Economic Development Strategic Plan, which was approved by the City Council in September of 2017, and we assisted in the implementation of the Economic Development Strategic Plan, including identifying opportunities for additional print and electronic marketing, outreach, and providing feedback and outreach materials, including the facade template and social media strategy. We identified opportunities to enhance Solano and San Pablo avenues, including increased maintenance and repair, removal of broken and unused news racks, and other dated furnishing. Met with the Arts Committee to discuss opportunities for expanding the arts and establish criteria for placement of murals, sculptures in commercial areas, and provided input on potential business uses for new development. 1920 to 1921 policy review and initiatives continue the implementation of the Economic Development Strategic Plan. That would include identifying options for a successful farmers market, inform marketing and outreach materials, including a marketing brochure and a promotional video, assist in the developing and analyzing results of a survey to evaluate efforts related to business attraction, retention, and permit customer service issues, and discover new ideas for supporting local business growth. We've been working with the City Planning Department to make sure that they have been streamlining their processes and to ensure for a customer and consumer-friendly interface. And we'd like to be able to say that that's going very smoothly, and I hope to continue to say that next year, that it has gone very smoothly. And we'd like to continue to encourage art in the commercial spaces, and we'd like to be able to recruit businesses that we think would fit well with our particular kind of environment on Solano. I think we'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from council on this work plan?
No questions.
Can I ask for public comment on each one separately?
Sure.
Okay, is there any public comment on the economic development work plan? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council for any final comments.
Sure. Yeah, I think that this is great. I'm happy with these items, and I think you could do more. I think that at the very least, we need to mention the revisiting of the zoning overlays on San Pablo Avenue, which Jeff was going to pursue with an SB2 grant, which could potentially bring new development to San Pablo. And I think in our strategic plan as well is the mention of a possible why can't I think of this thing that I've been saying for years now? Yes, thank you for that. Not strategic plan. What? Specific plan, yes. Needs to be in there as well as it is in our strategic plan. So I would ask for the addition of those 2 items, or perhaps putting them into one. I could leave it up to staff for the wording, but an examination of other avenues for economic development along San Pablo Avenue.
Other comments?
Yeah, I'll make, actually, I probably should have phrased this as a question. I was just curious on your last comment, what type of businesses do you think we should be pursuing, or the Solano Avenue Association? What do we not have on Solano Avenue that might be a good mix at this point?
There are lots of opportunities that we missed. We missed having Whole Foods in Albany. It ended up on Gilman. We missed having the Apple Store. It ended up on 4th Street. There are lots of things where if we had a more robust and active program for recruitment, we would be in the running for and be able to land a couple of those kinds of things. Those would make a huge difference to the tax base of the city, and they would make a big difference to the foot traffic and to the attraction of larger businesses. So there's that. Then there's the retention issue. We've had some difficulty in convincing some businesses that they can stay here and grow. And we want to be able to have a growth path for people who are here. Some of that would be enhanced by having a more flexible zoning approach. There was a certain amount of griping and grousing about the inflexibility with the planning division. And I think that we've made major inroads with that. The staff's been very cooperative and very forthcoming. So in that sense, I think we've done some good work. We wanted to see the city help fund the outreach and the research and, if you would, the business promotion, business attraction. And the city has done that. The city's been willing to put money into that. We thought a full-time person would be worth it. The city's having budgetary issues about that, but we think that's a good direction to go in.
Okay, thank you. I think this plan looks like the good bones of something, and you can work on this and kind of expand. And I have to say, I do look forward to going beyond the preview you gave us for your comments on the next big issue on our agenda this evening, Solano Avenue. So, thank you.
Any comments? Okay. I'm sorry, do we want a roll call vote for each one, do you think? Okay. So can I get a motion to accept this report?
So moved.
Would you, I would just add a substitute, or would you take a friendly amendment to add the item or items of which I spoke?
Fine with that. Do you need them to be reiterated, Ann?
Sorry.
It's the addition of consideration of possible zoning changes for economic development along San Pablo.
That's fine with me.
Okay, then I'll second that.
Poll the council, please.
Councilmember Barnes?
Yes.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuay?
Yes. Okay, next is the Climate Action Committee work plan.
We have Chair Samantha Smithies.
Good evening. I'm Samantha Smithies, Chair of the Climate Action Committee and Albany High School Senior. On behalf of the committee, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to present to you our 2019 through 2021 work plan. I would like to first highlight a few recent initiatives and accomplishments from the last two-year cycle. Most notably, we supported the development and launch of Community Choice Aggregation Program East Bay Community Energy, EBCE, which included the recommendation to opt up all Albany accounts to carbon-free electricity. Albany was one of only 2 cities to choose this automatic enrollment in 100% carbon-free electricity, resulting in significant progress toward our climate action goals and reiterating our role as a climate action exemplar. Recently, we have also assisted in initiating the process of developing a new climate action and adaptation plan by identifying goals, reviewing the request for proposals, reviewing proposals, interviewing consultants, and recommending contracting with Cascadia Consulting to develop the plan. We have narrowed down our goals for the climate action and adaptation plan to 3 main objectives: eliminate the use of fossil fuels, promote a carbon-free economy, and build a resilient community. Adding on to that, we have supported the planning process through review of a community survey, hosting a well-attended and meaningful community workshop, and conducting subcommittee research and analysis. Further, we also supported the development and promotion of the Carbon-Free Albany web platform, which encourages community members to take sustainable action by connecting them with resources, creating a competition-style environment, and facilitating collaboration. Now, moving to 2019 through 2021 policy review and initiatives. The majority of the items in our work plan align seamlessly with Objectives 1, advance climate action, and Objective 3, promote active transportation and safety within Goal 1 of the strategic plan, which is to foster a healthy and sustainable city, as well as Goal 2, engage our diverse community, namely Objective 2 within that, which is to promote disaster preparedness and resilience. The co-benefits produced from the initiatives in our work plan also fit into the various objectives concerning health, safety, and economic development. Before I move on to a more detailed review of our work plan, I'd like to note that our priorities may shift slightly as we continue to move forward in the climate action and adaptation plan process. And so we have constructed our work plan to allow some flexibility for this. Most of our work pertains to the new climate action and adaptation plan, particularly supporting its development and determining the committee role in plan implementation. From that also comes reviewing the plan progress annually, reviewing options for potential modifications to building construction regulations identified in the plan, and considering waste reduction efforts in line with the plan, specifically working with Stop Waste to explore a model single-use plastic policy. The remainder of the items on our work plan facilitate the climate action and adaptation plan, such as promoting the carbon-free Albany web platform and continuing to interact with schools to achieve the plan goals. However, we would like to continue to advise City Council on other near-term actions to address climate change, simultaneously to the development and implementation of the climate action and adaptation plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions from council?
When it comes to climate change, there's 2 aspects. There's mitigation, and what you actually talked about were mostly mitigation measures. Then there's adaptation, which is just a recognition that Little Albany by itself isn't going to change the climate, and we have to be prepared for droughts and floods and sea level rise and whatnot. So although the word adaptation appears a lot in what you discussed, I heard mitigation, not adaptation activities. So do you have specific adaptation activities in mind?
Yes, we do. So within one of our main objectives for the climate action and adaptation plan is creating a resilient community. So that includes finding more spaces for warm weather concerns, facilitating the distribution of masks in fires and other related projects to that, as well as increasing more resilient action and green infrastructure.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well, I think that adaptation component, I'm glad to see that you are doing something with this. More of a comment than a question at this point, but I particularly like that you're working with Stop Waste, and there will be new organic restrictions on organic waste coming down from the state. And I think that's a good thing to keep on the agenda because that actually does have an effect on greenhouse gas and climate. So I'm glad that's in the agenda.
Thank you.
No more questions.
Okay, I don't have any questions right now. Are there any questions, comments from the public on this work plan? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council for final comment. Anything?
It sounds good. Thanks for all your hard work.
Yeah, thanks as well for the hard work, but I wondered if we shouldn't add the addition of potential reach codes for electrification. That seemed to be missing, but that's a topic that has come up quite a bit lately. So If council is amenable, I would add consideration of reach codes for to promote electrification.
What kind of code?
Reach codes.
An acronym?
It's like a reach code. It's a where you're reaching farther. It's codes that would encourage people, give incentives for people to electrify.
I'm not opposed to that, but when I read this, I thought that where it said review options for potential modifications to building construction, I interpreted that would be included in that. I don't mind calling it out, but that was sort of, was that sort of where you guys were too?
Yeah, that was also our idea. Also, if you look at the last bullet point, which includes restricting natural gas in new building construction and exploring that, we were also imagining that paralleling a reach code.
I just think then weaving the words the phrases reach code and electrification in there would be appropriate, since those are terms that people are very familiar with.
Okay.
If that's what you're intending.
You want to make that a motion?
Let me just make a comment, just really briefly first. Comment doesn't particularly pertain to this, but I do want to comment that you're the second high school student that has been a chair of one of our advisory bodies and has done a fabulous job in your presentation. But I just think that says a lot about us, that we do have high school students on our committees and they are the chairs, and that's wonderful, so thank you.
Thank you.
Please come up and replace us here too. We're getting a little old up here.
Not too soon. If I could get a motion, please.
Yeah, I'll move that we approve the plan with the addition of the specific terms, reach code and electrification as appropriate, inserted appropriately by staff.
I'll second.
Poll the council, please.
Councilmember Barnes?
Yes.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuay?
Yes.
And the motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
And lastly, we have the Chair of Socioeconomic Justice, Bart Grossman.
Good evening, members of the council. It was not only refreshing to see a high school student, it was a little intimidating, but I will do my best. I'm pleased to share our draft two-year work plan. I wanted to first enumerate the other members of the commission: Judy Kerr, Gregory Downs, Margie Marks, Brian Paisley. Brian and Margie are here. And also wanted to thank our fearless staff leader, Isabel. And so let me tell you how we're thinking about this. Now, the charge of this commission is to research, analyze, discuss, and evaluate a broad range of data and opinions on social and environmental issues affecting the welfare of residents of Albany as inhabitants of both the local and global community, and to make recommendations to the City Council on positions and/or actions to take to address these issues. Not long ago, the Council questioned whether SEJC should continue as a commission, and I think the concern has always been that the charge is very broad, and sometimes it's hard to figure out what isn't a social and economic justice issue. But I think in the last 2 years, we've been able to demonstrate that the breadth of the commission is actually part of its strength, because the breadth has allowed council to use the commission to work on a broad array of justice issues raised by the council and the community. And I think the record of our efforts in the last 2 years supports your decision to continue with us. Let me just talk about some of the things we've done. We've reviewed and evaluated continuously Albany Project Hope, which is our homeless action program. And we've had quarterly reports and annual presentations, and we've been able to give them feedback. And we've seen a marked improvement this year in community feedback on this program. We've reviewed progress toward the housing element policies with community development staff. We see access to affordable housing is one of the most significant issues of economic and social justice in our city, and we hope to play a continuing role in this arena, and I will describe what we have in mind a little bit later. And arising from that housing element and also resident input, we recognize the need for a way to help landlords and residents negotiate rent increases. So we held several community meetings. We proposed and provided input on the creation of a rent review program. This program is now in place and working, and we'll be monitoring the effectiveness of this program and hopefully in reporting to you as it moves along. We also analyzed and made recommendations for the creation of a sugar-sweetened beverage tax, which was passed by 71% of Albany residents. And at the council's request, we've been making recommendations on the allocation of those tax revenues. We've provided input to staff on efforts to make information more widely available on low-income and senior tax exemptions, and we're continuing to monitor those and looking for ways to increase participation in those programs. We proposed, implemented, and evaluated a pilot drop-in resource center to assist people in the community who need help in accessing assistance programs to meet their needs. Such needs as housing, mental health services, medical services, and other needs. This project, which went from September 2017 to January 2018, was done in typical Albany style with staff leadership and a group of dedicated volunteers who are still involved, and several of them are on the commission. And I think we were able to demonstrate the availability of referral and information services is a very helpful addition to Albany Human Service programs. And out of the success of this pilot, we recommended that you fund a part-time position and provide space at the Senior and Youth Annex for weekly drop-in consultation for people in need of support, information, and referral. That program, with the leadership of Anne Marie Heineman, our staff person, is doing quite well, and we're continuing to monitor and learn about the needs that people have in this community. We provided a recommendation to the council for the development of a diversity and inclusivity survey and action plan, and we would like to suggest a slightly different take on that when we talk about our goals. As you can see in the work plan, we've organized our activities in terms of the council's strategic plan. First, your objective in Goal 1, to promote housing availability and quality. We would like to continue to review progress on the housing element policies. We would like to continue to review proposals that are coming from the state and regional level on multifamily housing and the potential for meeting housing affordable needs in the community. There are many proposals that are making their way from the state and other institutions to local communities. Some of them have very positive implications, some of them maybe not so much. We'd like to continue to offer some advice on those. And we would like to investigate what funding sources might be available for the creation of more affordable housing in Albany. We will continue to receive updates on the rent review program, and we would like to report to you in the fall on the effectiveness of that program and recommend any changes that seem to be needed in it. Okay, so that's Goal 1. In relation to Goal 2, engaging our diverse community, we would like to continue to receive updates on Albany Cares, which is the new name for the Drop-In Resource Center. We will be learning more, I think, from that program about what people in the community need and what things need to be developed here. And we would like to report to you in December on that. And we would also like to review and evaluate Project Hope in a continuous way. We've learned a lot about that program, and we see some areas where it could be strengthened. And then again, to continue to monitor and make recommendations related to the income and senior tax exemption program. In terms of Objective 3, continue to promote community-wide inclusivity. We would like to work on the issue of aging in place and identify service needs and supports. Some of you may have seen the report done by the World Health Organization. I think, Peggy, you sent that to me, and we've seen it in other places. They've developed a set of guidelines for achieving what they call an aging-friendly community. And a number of cities in California and nationwide have used these guidelines to assess aging friendliness and develop aging action plans. That includes Berkeley, West Hollywood, Washington, D.C., and others. We would like to develop such a plan and recommend to you the way we might move toward the development of an aging-friendly community plan and an assessment tool that would give us a sense of what's working well and where are people who are aging in this community having difficulty and what might we do to assist them. With regard to inclusivity of the rich diversity of people that we have in this city, we believe that a survey to identify the concerns and needs of populations continues to be important because we really can't do meaningful planning without input from all the people in the communities that comprise this city. So we would like to propose to you the development of a survey so that we have a baseline to see what people need, where there are difficulties, and where things are going well in terms of inclusivity. We would like to propose a model that we would develop for an annual Albany diversity report card so that we would be able to look on an annual basis at what progress we are making in terms of inclusivity in city government, in employment, and in participation in the community. That also would, I think, allow us to move toward a model for a social justice impact report. We think that when new pieces of legislation come before the council, in addition to an economic impact report, it would be useful for you to have a inclusivity and social justice impact report so that you can see what the implications might be of legislative changes on various groups in the city. So we would like to develop a model for doing that. And finally, we would like to continue to assist the council in identifying health and wellness programs to be developed with revenue from the sugar-sweetened beverage tax, which is now in place. So that's our plan.
Are there questions from council?
I would just like to make a comment. Ann Shu and I, the city clerk, helped a senior citizen in town try to figure out the tax exemptions on the parcel taxes this week, and she was very pleased that we were able to help her out. But that's something you and I maybe could discuss offline about, because I realize now there's a need for this. And
there's a need, and the program is currently underutilized, and we'd like to see something done about that.
So let's talk on our own time.
Yeah.
Any questions?
No questions at this point.
Questions? Okay, well, I have several. So I've lost my place here. On objective 2, number 2, under the promote housing availability and quality, review all new multifamily housing proposals for affordability. Can you explain or clarify for me what that means?
There'll be a variety of proposals that are in circulation that haven't come to the city yet.
Are you thinking like of legislation from?
Yeah, from legislation from Sacramento and some of the local governmental groups are proposing things. We'd like to help you to identify where there are possibilities and where there are problems.
So you're not thinking the developer comes in and wants to build a building that you want to look at the plans?
No.
Okay, that's where I was a little bit confused.
Bigger picture than that.
Thank you. Moving further down the list, provide input on ways to equalize burden on future and existing measures. Could you explain that a little bit?
Well, that's again around the senior and low-income tax exemption. We would like to take a look at how those programs could be improved as you move forward and as you look at new tax measures, provide some recommendations.
Okay,
At your initiative, obviously, so, yeah.
okay. And then talking about the model for the diversity report card, how would you gather your data for the report card?
Well, we would need the cooperation of the city to look at, membership of commissions, employment, who's participating in events, things of that nature. And we would want to work with you on developing what you see to be the most important indicators.
As a sanctuary city, we're really careful about what information we gather. And this seems to be totally opposite that, trying to gather information. And I'm trying to understand how those two things come together.
I think that we need to have a picture of ourselves, and we need to hear from people in the community what the needs are. We also have to have some goals, I think, for diversity as a community. So I think we have to have a way of looking at how much diversity we have, where we have lots of people involved, where we're not reaching people who we should be reaching. That's the kind of information we're talking about. We're not talking about, certainly not talking about individuals. I understand your concern about not labeling, and obviously we would be very careful in developing such a process, and certainly all it would be at this point would be a recommendation.
And then the last one, the impact report is part of staff reports. I've been hoping to get that done for a couple of years now. And I'm just wondering if we could kind of jump that forward and sort of pass that directly to staff if council's willing to go that way, and just accept the recommendation from you and move on now and not spend a whole lot more time on it.
I think that would be fine. We could, if staff wished, we could make some suggestions, but I have no problem with that.
Okay. So let's see, are there any public comments on this work plan? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to council for final comments. Anything?
I have a couple comments. This is a big work plan.
Yes.
How often are you meeting now?
We're meeting once a month.
Once a month.
But we will be also constituting some subcommittees to work on these issues.
Okay, because this seems like more than a once a month kind of agenda.
Yeah, most of these are going to need some subcommittee work.
Yeah. I have to say, I'm looking forward to hearing a report in November on the rent review board and how well that's working. We haven't got any feedback on that yet, so I'd like to know is it being used? Is it, how is it going? In that rent review board. I would say the one about reviewing all new multifamily proposals for the state. There's dozens of proposals coming down from the state, and maybe that is a subcommittee function that could be doing it, but that's almost a full-time job right there. Some of them go a long ways before they get tabled till next year. So, great if you can do it, but I'm a little dubious about how much time there's so many other issues that are more kind of immediately pertinent to what's going on in Albany. I would think maybe it'd be wiser to focus on those.
Yeah.
And these issues about state housing mandates and things, we don't have a big effect on those, but
they may have a big effect on us. So.
And they could have a big effect on us, it's true. But in any case, I think that might be a lot to chew, so.
Okay, well, we'll see what we can do and do the best we can. That herd is starting to thin.
It is.
So,
it is.
Yeah.
Any comments?
Yes, I could just, as an aside, after, a lot of these things died in suspense and appropriations last week, and there are a couple of bills that I'm aware of, for example, that the League of California Cities is not tracking. My bugaboo is AB 1487. So there might be, for cases where we have concerns that the league doesn't, there might be some value in having someone look at these bills. It's not very many.
Okay. And also, I think on that one, I think Jeff has done a really good job of kind of tracking a lot of these too. And so we don't want to overburden you because, like you said, you have a lot of things on your plate. So it may be almost better handled on a staff level unless you sort of get a red flag that we really need to follow this one.
Yeah, well, and we can certainly be in contact with Jeff as these things come up.
And, personally, I would really like for your focus to be on this aging in place and the model that the age-friendly communities. I think there's a lot of work to be done there, and I think it's beneficial across the community. So I think that would be a great place to put your main focus, and that also includes everyone. So it does touch on the inclusivity part. So that's just kind of my side. I'd like you to focus on that. And with that, can we get a motion to approve the work plan?
I'll move approval of the Social Economic Justice Commission's work plan.
Second.
Poll the council, please.
Councilmember Barnes?
Yes.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuay?
Yes, and the motion carries. Okay, that brings us to 10-1, review and policy direction on draft Solano Avenue Complete Streets Plan. May we have a staff report, please?
Yes, good evening. Before you tonight is the final draft version of the Solano Avenue Complete Streets Plan. This was part of a 14-month public process where we partnered with Tool Design Group and Local Government Commission and Opticos Urban Design to prepare the plan that is before you this evening. So for your review tonight, you're going to receive a presentation from me. We're then going to turn it over to Tool. You'll then have an opportunity for consultant Q&A. And then we would recommend that you open up the public comment, close the public comment, and then bring it back to the council for discussion of action. So to give you some context, the Solano Avenue Complete Streets Plan is intended to serve as an urban design document, which provides guidance for future improvements in infrastructure upgrades in the study area, which includes Masonic Avenue to Tulare. The scope of the plan in a big picture includes safety improvements, placemaking, upgrades, and economic development. And some particulars in that are included but not limited to street lighting, intersection alignments, signal modernization, sidewalk improvements, bus stops, stormwater management system, underground utilities, and public art. And so to give you some physical context, we have created this graphic to highlight the corridor as a whole, so from San Pablo to the Alameda. The blue hashed area in the middle represents the study area, so this is from Masonic to Tulare, so it's a little over half a mile of the entire corridor length. In terms of document consistency, we prepared the plan as part of a robust community engagement process. We also reviewed other city documents for consistency as means of implementing current policies as part of this document. One attachment to your staff report included exhibits from the city's active transportation plan, which does not currently identify Solano as having designated bicycle facilities. So we want to give you a snapshot of the overall public review timeline, going back to when the grant was awarded to the city, which was in July of 2017. So just taking it down by advisory body, the council prior to this evening had 5 reviews. This included the grant acceptance, the authorization to execute the grant, consultant contracts for both Local Government Commission and Tool Design Group, and then most recently the discussion of back and angle parking in November. The Planning and Zoning Commission has reviewed this twice. They looked at it on October 24th last year and then most recently on February 13th. In that recent review, they looked at the document that's before you tonight, so in its current draft form. They did not make a formal motion. However, there was general support. It was not unanimous, but there was majority support from the Commission during that discussion. With respect to traffic and safety, they've reviewed it a total of 5 times, starting with last spring when we gave them indication of the schedule, then an update post-workshop, and then another update in September, and then some further discussion in October, and then, of course, their draft review in February. And most recently, the Economic Development Committee and the Climate Action Committee reviewed this. It was reviewed twice by Economic Development as they continued it to a date certain to receive a summary of notes before taking formal action. In terms of public events, there were two workshops. One was a workshop last May 30th of last year, and then a pop-up event where we had an opportunity to partner with Flowerland. That was on September 22nd. As part of this process, we had a community advisory group comprised of stakeholders. We had a total of 3 meetings, and just to give you some idea in the composition, this included merchants, the Solano Avenue Association, residents, Albany Strollers and Rollers, and AC Transit. So we had, and City of Berkeley staff. So we had a fairly comprehensive group of folks participate in that. And with City of Berkeley staff, we had 2 separate meetings with them. We did an initial corridor walk on April 3rd of last year, and then we had a one-on-one meeting with the staff. So we interfaced with Beth Thomas and Fareed Javandal as part of the Transportation Division at the City of Berkeley. And then as part of our engagement last spring, we had individual stakeholder meetings. These were one-on-ones. So this included the Solano Avenue Association, the Orientation Center for the Blind, and Albany Strollers and Rollers. And so with that, there were a total of 23 plus meetings that have been held up to this point to form the preparation of this document. So the Traffic and Safety Commission on February 28th made a motion to forward recommendation for approval with inclusion of an alternative design. This design includes a one-way eastbound uphill cycle track on the south side of Solano and downhill sharrows with parallel parking on the north side of the street. And so I'm going to go back to this graphic because a question had come up about that recommendation as to why it wasn't vetted earlier in the process. And so you'll see with this red asterisk here, everything to the left of that preceded that hearing date. That idea was not revealed until February 28th. So everything after that encompassed that recommendation. Everything prior to that did not. And this did not come up in the community advisory discussions or the public events.
Could you just go over what you said one more time? I wasn't clear on it.
Sure, yes. Okay, so the red asterisk here represents the February 28th Traffic and Safety Commission meeting. So the alternative that has been proposed, a question had come up as to why it wasn't discussed earlier in the process. And so if you look at everything to the left of this asterisk, that was every public meeting that we had, engagement, so on and so forth. The idea of this alternative was not revealed publicly until February 28th. So everything you see after that is where this idea has been vetted more publicly. So as part of the Traffic and Safety Commission motion, they moved 4-0 to adopt the Complete Streets Plan with the alternative that contains that one-way uphill cycle track with bus boarding islands, cost estimates, and data on parallel parking for the north side of Solano, and then changing the angle on the south side of Solano. As part of that recommendation, they also included a back-end angle pilot program that would be a duration of 6 to 8 months and would occur prior to the development of any engineering documents as part of plan implementation. Additionally, staff was directed to include a summary of the commissioner's comments and a slide deck that was presented in that meeting as an appendix. So we included all of that information for you, including the meeting minutes as attachment 9 to your staff report. So a bicycle alternatives memo was prepared by our consultant. I'm going to let them go into the technical details of that and just capture for you at a high level that this was something that staff directed the consultant to prepare as a result of this action. We posted it on the on a project website and solicited comments from our community advisory group. And as part of your packet, there were comments received from AC Transit, the Solano Avenue Association, Flowerland, and Ann Freeman, who is a local Albany resident. And I just want to kind of give you a snapshot of the draft plan and remind you that in its current form, it does not preclude future bicycle improvements on Solano Avenue. If in the future the city were to consider an update to the active transportation plan, this would look at bicycle infrastructure and the pedestrian network citywide, not just the study area. In addition, you received correspondence. It's attachment 14 to your staff report. There may be a future opportunity to collaborate with the City of Berkeley, as they are in the process right now of pursuing funding for a master revitalization plan for Solano Avenue on the Berkeley side. And I just want to remind the council, in terms of what you're looking at tonight, the difference between a plan versus a project. So this plan is an urban design plan that makes recommendations at a high level for long-term strategies, policies, and future improvements on Solano Avenue in the study area. This plan does not include engineered design plans and shovel-ready projects. That's not the purpose of the plan. That's a different beast. That would meet the intent of a project, which would be subject to Chapter 8 of the city's municipal code, which falls under the purview of the Public Works Department. In that instance, projects are included as part of the capital improvements program and require some detail, including a project description, justification, expenditures, funding source, and timing. And again, we do not have defined CIP projects in this plan. This is a high-level plan with recommendations where future projects may come out of. So for your review tonight, we've given you 3 options for action. You have the potential to accept the plan as proposed and allow the Caltrans grant to be closed out. You could accept the plan as proposed and move forward with planning and design of improvements that are temporary and short-term and also would not present difficult conflicts with bicycle facility alternatives. You could also evaluate bike facilities on Solano Avenue as part of an active transportation plan or future general plan update. And lastly, you have the option of continuing the plan preparation to reach consensus regarding bicycle facilities as part of the draft plan. Now, I do want to throw the caveat out that if you do go with option 3, we are going to have to come back to you with a contract amendment in an amount to be determined, but it will have to come back here for funding. And I also just want to revisit this graphic briefly because what we're talking about in terms of bicycle facilities applies only to the study area. So that lower portion of Solano west of Masonic would not be part of that. And at this time, there would be no plan to include the Berkeley portion of that. So you're looking just at the blue hashed area. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to the project consultant to provide you with a presentation.
Great, thank you, Anne. All right. Good evening. My name is Brooke DeBose, and I'm the Regional Director for Tool Design. And I'm also an Albany resident. My family lives on Nielsen Street, and me and my husband and my 2 young boys, we walk, we bike, we ride transit, and we drive around Albany. So we appreciate everything that the city has to offer us. So tonight I'm here with my colleague Joel Schaefer to provide just a very quick overview of the Solano Avenue Complete Streets project, including the planning process, which Anne kind of previewed, talk over the conceptual design and considerations for potential bike facilities along the corridor. Just briefly about us, Tool Design is a national planning, engineering, and landscape architecture firm. We specialize exclusively in bicycle and pedestrian transportation. We have 180 staff across North America, and we're headquartered in Washington, D.C. And because of that, that's given us a seat at the table to lead a lot of the preeminent national research and design guidance. And I just want to call your attention to the top one, which is the AASHTO Bike Guide. We're currently working on that update, and once it's adopted, it'll be the national design guidance for bicycling in the United States. We were really pleased to partner with Opticos. They're a Berkeley-based urban design firm, and they're responsible for some of the beautiful drawings and urban design elements in the plan. And their principal, John Meeke, he's also an Albany resident, was very involved with the project and could not be here tonight. He's on the East Coast. So I think that Anne kind of summarized this, but I just want to share a quick overview and recap of the project schedule and process. We kicked off the project with the community about a year ago, and we developed the initial design in this room over a 2-day period. We invited the public and community and city staff to come in and meet with us to share their ideas for the design, to give us feedback on what we were drawing up. So it was a very transparent and open process there. And then in the fall, we helped the city with a demonstration event along Solano Avenue in front of Flowerland. Got a lot of really good feedback and conversation with people on the street there, and then hosted a design review workshop within Flowerland itself, where we had a lot of community members come out and share their opinions. So the result is the draft plan report, and this really reflects the city's existing policy guidance as it stands and the input that we've received from the community so far. And as Anne has talked about, and you're all well aware, I think more recently the process has brought to light a number of questions and ideas about the future of Solano Avenue, and I think in my mind that's a really good thing, and we'll speak later to that in the presentation. So I'm just going to talk through the chapters of the final plan report very briefly. So in terms of the first chapter is really an introduction and an overview. The plan focuses on streetscape and mobility improvements along Upper and Solano Avenue. And is really focused on urban design and infrastructure upgrades, as Anne mentioned. I won't recap this for brevity. And as we also talked about, we were engaged with many stakeholders along the way in community, including the Community Advisory Group, many of whom are here tonight and were really terrific throughout the process. Local merchants, Center for the Blind, City of Berkeley staff, lots of great input along the way. So chapter 2, and I'll also mention that we tried to keep the plan document very succinct. I know that you have a lot of reading to do, and so typically what we try to do is provide the report itself as a summary, and there's also a number of technical memorandums that we developed and analysis that are included as appendices in the plan report. So if there's more question, there's always a deeper dive for late night reading. But I will say that Chapter 2 is focused on existing conditions and recommendations for the conceptual plan. I think that you're all well aware that there's a lot of opportunity to improve Solano Avenue. I guess if I were to sum it up, the infrastructure is not really aged that well out there, and it's largely favors motor vehicle access and speeds to the corridor. So we were really looking at focused on improving that. So I'm going to hand it over to Joel, who's going to talk through the conceptual design at a pretty high level.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Joel Schaefer. I'm an engineer at Tool Design, and so I'll be just talking for a minute or two about the conceptual design that's presented in the plan. So there were 4 main themes in the conceptual design. They were safety and accessibility, streetscape and placemaking, parking, and stormwater management. So starting off with the first item, safety and accessibility. So the goal of this was to ensure safety for all users, including pedestrians, transit riders, drivers, and bicyclists. So the recommendations that are incorporated into the concept design are to reduce curb radii at corners to decrease vehicle turning speeds, add corner curb bulb outs and crossing islands to shorten pedestrian crossing distances, minimize pedestrian exposure time to vehicles in the street, narrow travel lanes, and reduce vehicle speeds. Also, to realign and upgrade curb ramps and provide better access for people using wheelchairs, pushing strollers. Installing colored and textured paving material for on-street parking to further reduce the perceived width of travel lanes and to better delineate parking from the travelway. Installing crosswalks with high visibility markings. Increasing visibility at corners by removing and relocating parking signs, site furnishings, and other obstructions within 30 feet of crossings. Installing rectangular rapid flashing beacons, also known as RRFBs. They're basically those lights that you push when you want to cross, and then the lights will turn on, at several of the intersections to enhance the crossing safety, especially at school crossings. Improving bicycle connections across Solano Avenue by narrowing travel lanes, adding crossing refuge islands, and installing those RRFBs that I just mentioned. And reducing conflicts between users by simplifying intersection configurations, employing access management strategies, and realigning irregular or complex intersections into 90-degree 3- or 4-way junctions. And then also throughout the corridor, we added pedestrian scale lighting, especially at crossings, to ensure pedestrian safety while walking at night. So that was all the first point. So the second point, streetscape and placemaking. So those expanded bulb outs that I mentioned, we propose programming them with placemaking elements like benches, landscaping, parklets, public art. There are areas for co-locating transit stops and pedestrian amenities to create additional bus parklets. Spaces for adding landmark or gateway features such as medians, iconic transit stops, gathering spaces. Open space opportunities and areas for landscaping and stormwater plantings. Parking was also important, so we wanted to maintain or limit the effects on vehicular parking because it's valued by both businesses and visitors to the corridor. But while maintaining vehicular parking, it's obviously important to add options for other modes. So we included increasing accessible spaces for people who are in wheelchairs and would need a van accessible space or just an accessible space in general. And also programming flex spaces. So those would be spaces that could be used for bike parking, parklets, or a number of other activities. And then the final overall theme was stormwater management. So this concept design proposes maintaining the existing system and recommends installing valley gutters between the travel lane and parking lanes, and so that water flows in the valley gutters and would go into existing inlets or into proposed landscaping along the corridor. So there's actually 3 different sheets showing this, and we can dive into detail as we go, but that is the proposed concept design for the corridor.
Excellent. Thank you, Joel. Just a few examples of what this would look like. So right now, the sidewalks in several areas are buckled and constrained through pinch points, so really cleaning those up and providing wider sidewalks throughout the corridor. Also looking at opportunities for bicycle access and bicycle parking along the corridor, as well as opportunities for shared micromobility. And then really, as Joel mentioned, rethinking curbside uses to be useful for everyone, and that includes back and angle parking as an idea. I know that that's an idea that had a lot of conversation throughout the project, and so great that that's being considered as a longer-term pilot project. Chapter 3 includes the streetscape design palette. This is really where your creative juices get flowing. We included a lot of ideas for landscaping, plazas, and placemaking, and bus stop enhancements. The final chapter focuses on implementation. As Ann mentioned, there's not a dedicated funding source for any of these capital improvements when they're ready to be born. So the way that we address this is really looking at a phased approach over time. And a number of the street safety improvements in particular could be done in the near term and could be compatible, I think, with pretty much any longer term vision for the corridor. So I just really encourage council on that point to keep this in mind, that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit opportunities to improve Solano Avenue regardless of where the planning or design process goes, and not to lose sight of that, because I think that there's just, people are ready for some change out there, which is great. And we also work with a lot of cities who are working on rapid implementation of safety and design projects that can really move the needle in terms of safety and mode share. So at the February Traffic and Safety Commission, an alternative concept that includes bike facilities was presented. And so our design engineers drafted a technical memorandum to help the city answer some of these initial questions about if there's a policy change to designate Solano Avenue as a bikeway, what are the options out there? And so we developed this memorandum, and I'll say it's really not an exhaustive analysis of this question, but I encourage you to think of it as a starting point for this conversation. So we looked at 5 different options, including the one put forth by the Traffic and Safety Commission. And I'm not going to go through them in a lot of detail, but I will share kind of the bike design principles that I think are good to keep in mind as you have this conversation. And the first one is that we always try to design for a low-stress bicycling environment, and that means that most people will feel comfortable riding there. So you think of the Albany Greenway or a bicycle boulevard or the new protected bike lane along San Pablo Avenue as all as examples of low-stress bicycling environments. And given the speeds and volumes along Solano Avenue, the greater separation a bike facility is from moving traffic, the better. And that's not always possible to achieve, especially in constrained right-of-ways when there's a lot of competing needs. But it's just important to recognize that when you design higher stress facilities, that a smaller percentage of the population is going to use it. And so that's why you see streets that have bike lanes next to high-speed moving traffic, and there's not a lot of people using them. The second is that it's going to be important to provide equivalent facilities in both directions along Solano Avenue. And the purpose of that really is to make sure that if you're going to provide, for example, a really family-friendly, comfortable route in one direction, that you're not stranding people at one end of their destination, right? And if you are, then that could potentially invite some challenging issues like wrong-way riding along that facility. There are circumstances where we design different types of facilities on a street or roadway that has a fairly steep grade, typically steeper than Solano Avenue, where we'll develop an uphill bike lane and a downhill shared route. Those are typically facilities that are considered higher stress, and they're oftentimes places where we design for recreational bicyclists. But that's not to say it couldn't be done on Solano Avenue. It's just something to think about there. I'll also mention that a bike route, which is essentially a stencil on the ground with a sign, is going to be discontinued as a bicycle facility in the AASHTO bike guide, so that'll no longer be considered a facility once that document is adopted.
Could you repeat that point?
Sure. So a bike route, which is really just a signed route where bicyclists are sharing the road with traffic, that has traditionally been called by Caltrans a Class 3 facility and is recognized across the U.S. as a type of bike facility. That is no longer going to be the case because it's really just a marking on the ground or a route, but it doesn't really provide any facility for bicyclists. It's different from a bicycle boulevard, and there are enhanced routes that are shared with traffic. Typically, those are paired with traffic calming and other elements to provide a comfortable shared space. Yeah. And then in terms of the cost and feasibility for a low-stress facility like a protected bike lane, as you have along San Pablo Avenue, the current curb line poses a pretty big challenge out there. The existing curb extensions would have to be entirely reconstructed to provide a linear path of travel for a cycle track or a protected bike lane. The reason for that is because you have a lot of, if you follow the curb line, there's a lot of dips and changes as you go around those bulbs, and that would be a pretty challenging environment for someone to bike. We would not design for it as such. You could provide a straighter path of travel there, but it would be probably compromising some of the parking spaces there. So that's just something to keep in mind. So in short, when we evaluated the different bike options, I think you can get a bike lane on the road without too much cost or parking loss, but it would be relatively high stress for some of your community members, and that's something to think about. A lower stress facility will be considerably more expensive and have a bigger impact on the existing parking out there, but would be certainly something that would continue a facility like the Albany Greenway along your main street. Just kind of in closing there, I'll say that if the council would like the city to further analyze these options, I would definitely recommend a more exact parking count. We provided very loose percentages in the memo because it's just, these are just ideas right now. Also looking at how it would affect other modes like pedestrian safety and comfort, transit operations. Easy Transit wrote a great memo regarding that element of it, that these are all elements that should be evaluated. So I'm going to close it there and open it up to your questions.
Thank you very much. Are there council questions? Michael, do you want to start? Okay, Pete? Hold on.
I have a comment before we go to public comment, but I don't really have a question of the speaker.
Can you hold your comments after public comment?
I would prefer to just make a request for public speech.
Okay, but you have a question?
I have questions.
Okay.
Okay, so some of these are kind of specific and some are broader. And some, it may just be such a dumb question, it'd be hard to answer. But, you know, the whole idea was trying to slow traffic down to make it more walking and possibly bike-friendly. Is it necessary to have the road be always straight? If you stand up at the top of Solano and look down, that road is completely straight. But you do have some possibility that you could kind of wind it a little bit or add some variation in the straightness. Is that something that would not be permitted by Caltrans or whoever?
Yeah, what you're describing sounds to me like something called a chicane, which is a traffic calming treatment that's often used more on residential streets where there's a shift in the roadway that encourages drivers to just be more aware and cautious in the environment. You're right, you could roll a bowling ball down Solano Avenue and it would hit a pin at San Pablo, right? Typically, traffic calming treatments are more appropriate for residential streets, and they do have some limited application on a street like Solano Avenue. There's things to keep in mind there. AC Transit operates bus lines, and it's a truck route. So from that perspective, we'd want to think about, if we were to think about some kind of change in the alignment of the street, that it would work for those uses.
Sort of following with that, were roundabouts ever proposed or thought about it at certain intersections, say Santa Fe and Solano or Masonic and Solano? I mean, those also have the impact of slowing things down.
Yeah, we did look at roundabouts or traffic circles in the initial design phases, and to be honest, I can't remember why they stayed on the drawing board and didn't proceed further. I think that there's a lot of wide sidewalk. You know, you have these big curb extensions now in some areas where the landscaping has seen better days. And so there was a thought of how can we slow vehicles through the intersections where people are crossing the street and make that really comfortable environment for people to be without just only extending the curbs. And so those are how the pedestrian refuge islands were developed in the draft design, and we also looked at roundabouts. I think that there was some thought about, you know, it's the peanut butter and jelly between the two piece sandwich breads for lower and upper Solano, right? And trying to have a consistent design vocabulary for the whole corridor was something that we kept in mind. So having just a couple of roundabouts in the middle, I think, was part of the question. And now that I'm thinking back to it, of let's have an urban design that really reflects throughout the whole corridor.
Okay. Were rides share services, the Ubers and the Lyfts or some taxi form, were those discussed in terms of how this might be used on Solano Avenue?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it certainly came up, not just in terms of ride sharing, but also in terms of delivery, because there's so many restaurants along the corridor where people are kind of the Caviars and Grubhubs and even local residents that are picking up. So this plan doesn't get into that level of detail to identify like areas where you would reserve curb for pickup and drop off and things like that. But I think that there is some discussion of that in the narrative. And there's certainly recognition that the curbside needs to be managed well to work really well, so.
Okay. Another question I had was, You say in the beginning of the parking that we're a regional center, that people, implying that I guess that people come from great distances to come to Solano Avenue. What do we base that on?
And I'll defer to you on that question.
I think the simple way to answer that is what we heard from some of the merchants is that they do have a clientele that comes from outside of the area. Certainly we heard a lot of this from Flowerland, that they have a clientele that they serve that is not limited to Albany. They draw from Marin, Orinda, Oakland, and points beyond due to their popularity.
So basically just this is the story and we think it's probably true?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't discredit what the merchants say. I mean, they have direct interactions with their customer base, so.
Okay, well, it may be true, but it's sort of the first thing that's in that parking section, and it sort of implies that, well, of course we need parking because we have people coming from great distances. But there's it's on some level it's hearsay. It may well be true, but I don't know for sure that that's true. How many, was there any discussion of parking slots that we put out there that will have to be used for electric car charging?
Similarly, we didn't get into that level of detail, but that's a great question. And I can't remember whether we called that out in the narrative.
I didn't see it in there, but,
yeah.
But we are going to have to start setting aside lots of parking for electric car charging.
Yeah, absolutely.
Was there any discussion about paid parking? I know that it's a little tangential to this, but we're conceivably going to be spending millions of dollars on redoing the street. We can't raise the money, obviously, through parking meters, but it would seem to me if you're going to have a discussion about the need for timed parking or short-term parking, parking meters or paid parking should be part of that discussion. Did that take place?
Yeah. So parking management is always a critical piece of managing the public space of retail areas. There is an ongoing parking study that addressed a lot of this, and so we reviewed and referenced it, but we didn't make any sort of policy recommendation within this plan because of that concurrent effort.
Okay. Okay, I'll leave it at that. I could go on, but I'll leave it at that point.
Yeah, thank you. So that was interesting to hear about the bike routes being deprecated. So does that include a route with painted sharrows? Would that also be considered a bike route, or is that some other assigned facility?
Sharrows can be applied on a bike route, but they can also be used for wayfinding and helping people find their way. So it's not that they can't be applied in the future. It's that depending on the context, there would be additional treatments that would be necessary for bicyclists to feel comfortable out there.
I guess what I'm asking is, you're saying that a signed bike route will no longer be considered a Class 3 facility? Is that what you had said previously, or?
Not exactly that, because Caltrans will need to decide to adopt the guidance in the AASHTO Bike Guide. So that's sort of a technical state and national question that you're asking.
Okay.
But in terms of the AASHTO Bike Guide and the design guidance that is providing, and that will be sort of the national guide until the MUTCD is updated, will not include a assigned bike route as a bike facility.
Okay, so thinking about that in general is changing, and if I were to sum it up. Okay. You did do a parking count for the street, which showed the addition of, I believe, 6 new spaces. And I'm wondering if that count included the flex zones that you talked about, or would the flex zones have to be carved out of that parking?
The flex zone spaces are not counted towards the vehicle parking spaces that are in the report.
Okay,
They're separate, right? Yeah.
So we get the flex zones plus the additional parking. Okay, thank you. Valley gutters, can you speak to why you would suggest them on our street?
Whoa, you might have stumped me. Do you have anything to say about valley gutters? Great.
So typically, that's one of the less expensive options for drainage on a street because you're not digging under to install piping or anything like that. It's the water is flowing on the surface, which is the current situation, and so that would save money in terms of installation. But one of the benefits of the valley gutters is that with all the new landscaping that's being proposed, you can actually siphon that water directly into landscaping on the street, whereas if it goes down into a subterranean pipe, it's much harder to get it back up to water that new landscaping.
And would you say that the regrading of the street to conform to something that has valley gutters would be significant?
I would say, so the street's going to need to be repaved regardless because it's not in great shape as is. But yeah, to build the valley gutters, they actually serve as kind of a buffer between the angled parking and the travel way that's proposed in the concept design. So it wouldn't be, I guess to answer your question, it wouldn't be significant because again, it's just a surface treatment as opposed to like digging down and installing subterranean drainage.
Okay, but there is some expense involved in regrading the street.
Yeah, because the valley gutter it's made out of a different material than it's concrete typically, and the pavement is asphalt typically. So.
And do you have an opinion on the effect of valley gutters on cyclists?
Yeah, so one of the drawbacks of valley gutters is that during a rainstorm, you would, if it's raining enough, like I guess yesterday or over the weekend, you may have to bike through, a stream essentially, not a super deep stream, but a stream of water because it's on the surface of the roadway.
Okay, thank you. The curbs in the plan, with the curbs between the business, I'm not going to describe this very well, so bear with me. The curbs between the businesses and where parking is are mostly going to move, are they not, in order to make a number of sidewalks wider?
Yeah, so the curb line does shift in certain areas, especially there are constrained areas that are much more constrained than others. For example, the sidewalk on the block with Flowerland. So it's, I think, 4 or 5 feet wide at certain points, which is like the absolute minimum that is allowed for accessibility reasons. So certain pinch point areas like that, the curb line would be moved to widen it.
Okay.
And street furniture, including signage, trees, and other things may need to be relocated in order to accomplish that so that when you do shift that curb line, that furniture doesn't end up in the middle of your new wider sidewalk.
Right, right. And do you have any idea about how many curbs would have to be moved in your suggested vision or plan?
Not off the top of my head, but the focus was really on those constrained pinch point areas. So if an area, there are some areas that do have wide, 10-foot wide sidewalks, which don't necessarily need to be adjusted because they are already fairly comfortable. But the focus was mainly on those constrained segments.
Okay. And one last question. Did you use the Street Mix software for your diagramming?
Yeah, so for the bicycle options memorandum, which we developed towards the end of the process, the 5 different options that were analyzed were developed in Street Mix.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I've got several questions. As we look at the different options, option 2 talks about improvements that are temporary or short-term. I'm not quite sure which ones those would be.
I'm sorry. Which one what are you referencing?
This might be a better question for Ann, since the city wrote the staff report.
Let me rephrase, or refocus, I guess. On option 2, it talks about improvements that are temporary or short-term. I'm not quite sure what of all of this, or am I not reading it right, which is possible.
Yeah, is Justin? I'm going to defer that one to Justin.
Anybody answer this question?
This is the memo or the?
It's option 2 in the memo.
It's on the, what we're supposed to decide, but I want to make sure I understand which is which.
Hi, Justin Freed, City of Albany Transportation Planner. That was mainly referring to some short-term improvements that could be made, like crosswalk enhancements, some of the recommendations that weren't really dealing with changes to the curb line or in-street improvements. There was components around art and street furnishings that, whether we have any of the other bike facilities under consideration or under discussion, wouldn't necessarily conflict with that. So we could still move forward with some of those safety enhancements while taking some time to think about other alternatives.
Okay,
So, and that was the, when our consultant referred to low-hanging fruit, you were referring to low-hanging fruit? Was that kind of the same idea?
Exactly.
Okay, so I don't believe at this time, not sure which one of you to look at. I'll look at you. The trucks are permitted on the side streets, and we don't encourage them to go on the side streets. But if the plan has the loading zone on a side street, then you have your trucks going down the side street and then turning on either Marin or Washington. Again, neither one of which are truck routes. Is that a problem? Is that?
I think the intent there, from what we heard through the engagement process, is that deliveries can often be tricky on Solano because it is a bus route and a truck route, and it's not uncommon where a delivery truck may obstruct the right-of-way and limit vehicles from passing. So the intent was to allocate curb space on those adjacent streets where it makes sense and it doesn't conflict with residential uses, so that there would be some ability to temporarily load and unload. I suppose it's possible that there would be some potential truck usage of those side streets. It's not.
I mean, they'd have to, because they couldn't back around back to Solano. I think it's just something we need to keep in mind as we're looking at this. Will the unintended consequence be that now we've created a different problem? And have we created a problem for bicyclists even on these more narrow streets, that all of a sudden there's a big truck coming after them? So just something I think we need to be thinking about. You were talking about slowing down the traffic. Was there ever any consideration of putting in stop signs?
That was not a treatment that was considered as part of the design process.
And how many, with moving the bus stops, it seems like we gained some parking. Can you remind me how many spaces we gained?
I think it's a total of 16 spaces.
I thought it was 16, and then I thought I heard 6, and I just wanted to be sure that I was clear. Okay, so it is 16, okay. I believe in their work plan, traffic and safety is talking about updating the ATP. Can you talk a little bit about what that process would be?
I'm going to defer that to Jeff.
Good evening. The current active transportation plan was adopted by council in April of 2012, I believe, and the preparation of it was started in 2010, 2011. And with any plan of that nature, it's kind of reaching the end of its life. There are some elements of it that I think everybody would agree should be re-examined, particularly as Brooke was mentioning, as new standards come out for bicycling. We need to be using the most modern guidance and methodologies. So we've started to talk at the staff level about the value of preparing a new active transportation plan to incorporate some of those new standards, as well as we're getting to understand better how people want to travel through the city on their bicycles or by foot.
So is there a timeline for that in the next year, the next 2 years?
There's no specific timeline. I think it would be a useful thing to start in the next few years, but it's going to be a decision for council ultimately in balancing all the other things that you would like to see us working on.
I guess another question, probably a staff-related question. Jeff, probably you're the best one about this. about what kind of data we have as far as how many accidents we have every year between pedestrians and cars, bicycles, pedestrians, any other choice. How many bicyclists use Solano every day? With better facilities, what do we think how many more would we have? Those kind of, any idea on those?
Yeah, I'm going to let Brooke take that one.
So we did analyze collisions along the corridor over a 5-year period, and that should be in one of the appendices. Not surprisingly, they're clustered around a couple of the more active intersections, like the Albany Greenway crossing, for example, which is why it's so great that that's about to be upgraded. In terms of counts for different modes, I think that we only had vehicle volumes along the roadway, no turning movements. And in terms of bike counts along Solano, there were none, there's no data on that currently. What we do know is that there is general data in terms of people's willingness to use different types of facilities. And when you have higher stress facilities, then you typically attract a very small percentage of the population, say, less than 5%. And when you provide for a more comfortable facility, like the Albany Greenway, you're going to see a lot more people out there of different ages and abilities. And so I think that there's really a continuum for you to consider as well in your the future active transportation plan about what the goal is for that, and if mode shift is a primary driver, then thinking about more low stress connections for the city is going to be a really important way to achieve that. Yeah. I'll also mention we've been talking about sort of an iterative implementation strategy, and oftentimes we'll work with communities to do that for bicycle facilities too. So you're not starting with the Cadillac, you're not starting with this world-class low-stress bikeway network, right? You're starting with bike lanes, and then you're starting with buffered bike lanes, and then you move to a protected bike lane. So there are ways to develop those facilities over time, dependent on funding and community support, and other elements as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, before we open it up, anybody have a last question? You want to make your comment?
Yeah, my comment is about the difference between a de novo hearing and an appellate hearing. Now, sometimes councils or judges, for example, have an appellate role, which is they just look at a process, and if there's a problem with the process, it's their role to figure out what the problem was, but their role is not to evaluate the outcome of the process. Typically, our hearings are what are called de novo hearings, planning and zoning reviews, for example, where we can, redo the whole process and make our own judgments all over again. So at this point, up to this point, with this process, I've felt like as a council member that I wanted to take an appellate type role. I went to the first meeting. I spent about a half an hour there at Flowerland looking around. I got a sense that I thought the process was good. People were engaged. There was a lot of people. And I don't have a real granular, nitty-gritty set of opinions about the street, unlike some of the merchants, for example. So I was fine with it. I thought my obligation as a council member was to see that there was a good process in place. I didn't have any ego one way or the other about what the outcome was. I just wanted to make sure there's a good process. And a process can be good even if you don't get what you want. That's the important thing to remember. So if anyone in this room has concerns that the process was inadequate, or and sort of from an appellate perspective, the process wasn't adequate after we spent in grant money about $180,000, and our local match was free staff time. Is that right?
Yeah, it was. We tracked our hours and noted what that would be based on an hourly as part of it.
And 23 meetings. So I just would like to know if anyone thinks that was an inadequate process, regardless of the outcome. I want to know about it, because I think it was an adequate process, and maybe I'm wrong. And so as we proceed tonight, I will later, after I hear the public comments, I will perhaps come to some conclusions and sort of in a more de novo vein as to what I would like to see happen. But I'm not there yet, and I would like to listen to these comments from that perspective.
Okay, as we start the public comment, could I see a show of hands of people who wish to speak this evening? Great. I'm going to reduce it to 2 minutes. And please, try to respect the previous speaker. If they've said what you think, you can just say that, I agree with that person, or make your comments as brief as you can. And I also want to remind you that we want you to be respectful of each speaker. You need to address the council, not the audience. And please don't applaud or make negative comments. We want everyone to feel comfortable with their comments and with speaking, and we don't want anyone to be intimidated. So with that, Anne, can you read the first 3 names?
Yeah, and if there's anyone that would like to submit speaker card, please step on the back of the speaker, please. Robert Chasty, Aaron Priven, and Ken McCroskey.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Robert Chasey on behalf of the Economic Advisory Committee. First, this is actually a wonderful thing, and speaking as somebody who's 2,000 years old, there's lots of time to do this right. I think there's been a good process. Our committee thought that the staff and the consultants did a really good job, but there have been new ideas that have come up late in the process, and I think that is partly because the process itself has generated increasing interest. This subject did not come to my committee, our committee, until February. So we've only come across it very, very recently, and it's maybe our fault that we didn't get involved sooner. But if you think about it, that's what the process has been in the whole town, where more and more people have stepped up as we're doing this. This will take a long time. We'll spend millions and millions and millions of dollars on this, and it will be with us for many, many, many decades, maybe 50, 60 years before we come back to revisit this. So with that in mind, I would say we have the time to think about this carefully. Our committee, you might say, adopted 2 unanimous motions within this context. And if I were to describe it, both of them, it's tap the brakes, slow down the process a little bit, make sure that even if an idea came along a little later, that it gets properly vetted and heard from. If it's a good idea, regardless of who brought it up, whether you admire this person or not, or whether there's politics around it, put that aside and look at the ideas and look at the value of the ideas. So a few things we liked. We liked the idea of a back-end study because, for example, AT&T requires all its drivers to back in. Safety studies show that it's better. I guess we've submitted some notes and comments to the city on basically on our stuff. We'll follow up in writing. One more thing about center dividers. We're skeptical about whether that'll work for trucks and buses on Solano.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Aaron Priven. I was aware of the first of these meetings when they came out, and I thought, great, it's a complete streets project. Albany's going to really reduce its reliance on automobiles, really increase the emphasis we put on transit and bicycles and pedestrians. I also don't have strong opinions about how much of it goes to bicycles, how much goes to pedestrians, how much goes to transit. I just think it's important to do better. And so I was really happy to see this. And then I got the result, and it's an 8% increase in car parking. That's not what I expected. And maybe I should have paid more attention. I know I was out of town there were 2 meetings, and I was out of town for one of them, and I don't remember the other one, but I wasn't expecting that. So is that a problem with the process? I don't know, but I think it's a problem. And I think if you look at the big picture here, what we're really seeing is a complete streets process where there's some minor nibbling at the edges. We've got some increased sidewalk widths, which is great. Most of those are accompanied with, now you have to press the button to cross. So you're, again, that's emphasizing cars, because cars don't have to press buttons, people do, pedestrians do. So all of that is saying this is doubling down, not in an obvious way, but the end result is doubling down on exactly what a complete streets program is not supposed to do. It's emphasizing car use. And I'm not going to tell you that it should be an uphill bike lane or a downhill pedestrian walkway or, you know, scooter paths or whatever. I don't know. But this isn't it. And I just hope that when we do a good Complete Streets program, that its greatest contribution to the carbon problem isn't that the plan itself will be a carbon sink on our shelves. Thank you.
Thank you.
And after Ken McCroskey would be Alan Kane, Carrie Schultz, and Robert Abraham.
Wow. The last two speakers blew through most of my notes, so I'll just add to that. I agree that the plan itself and a lot of the options available within it seem to be well thought out, and it seems like a good framework for us to use. I don't agree that it's at a finished state where we're ready to move on to the next step. You know, there's a question about alternative plan coming in later in the process. Speaking as a stroller and roller, we had lots of conversations about getting involved in the process, giving input, and we invested in the process. But then what we saw coming out of that when we saw the draft plan was a plan that made cycling a little less comfortable on Solano, that didn't add anything to protect cyclists or encourage cyclists to get off the sidewalks, or the scooter riders or the skateboard riders who are there today. So we didn't see that increased safety or complete street. So that was when an alternative plan was formulated. The carbon action plan, or sorry, did I get that right? Our CAP plan is looking for a reduction in carbon of a large amount, and about 2/3 of that need to come, according to the plan, from automobile transportation and internal combustion vehicles. If we want to get people to switch to bicycles, we need to provide a place where they feel safe. So that's what I'm interested in. I think we really need to take time, and here I'm going to thank Elder Chisti for his words. I think we need to take the time and invest our dollars and our grant money wisely, and take the time to formulate a full compromise plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alan Kane, Solano Avenue Association, once again looking at a split room, not a casino at the waterfront or a mall or crosses on a hill. This time it's bike lanes. So, wow, that's kind of rough. So we guess the plan so far has costed $200,000, right? Roughly 180. So the plan that was about 200,000. Where do I begin? So, Solano Avenue businesses should not have to gamble on vanity projects that have obscure examples of success, often in other states or situations with only a remote resemblance to Solano Avenue. Frankly, I don't care if it works in Pleasantville, New York. I'm assuming that all of this current thinking is because Solano Avenue is a dangerous place for cyclists, and bike lanes by armchair planners will not reduce that risk. Education, enforcement for cyclists and motorists alike will reduce that risk. Before going any further, I'd like to say that the Solano Avenue Association doesn't actually agree with the Complete Streets program. We find the Strollers and Rollers program has merits. We don't like the idea of center islands. It would illuminate a stroll parade. It would injure people during a stroll. We don't like the idea of bulb outs. I won't go into that. Flashing lights on the side of crosswalks that tell you to pay attention to the middle of the crosswalk. Don't know. So we certainly have some agreement. But the Solano Avenue Association swallowed it because it went through a process of many, many months, of many thousands of dollars and many hours. It's done. It's a product. It's paid for. It's purchased. It may not be the best product according to some people, but it's a product that's been paid for and it's done. Putting a bike lane on Solano Avenue provides novice cyclers with a false sense of security. They already have Marin, they have Washington, and I do not believe in this build it and they will come model.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Carrie Schultz. I am an El Cerrito resident. I work in Albany. My children went to school in Albany. I've lived in Berkeley and Kensington. and I'm an active member. I was an active member of the Albany PTA, and I was also on the Community Advisory Committee. In the past 15 years, almost all of my economic dollars have been spent in Albany. I come to Solano to shop, I come to eat. 15 years ago, there was no reason to come to the bottom of Solano. So to think that it's hearsay that people come from other communities, you can just look at the vibrancy of the restaurants that have taken place, the new places, and see that indeed you need to have community. Tonight I ate at Little Star Pizza. There's 8 bike racks on that block. 1 bike pulled up while I was there, the other remained empty. There was Cal grads in Little Star Pizza. I was in Little Star Pizza. The people next to me had driven to Little Star Pizza. I didn't question all the people eating, but it was definitely a vibrant restaurant full of people who came there in their cars, not on their bikes. I'm not privileged enough to bike for my errands. I'm a mother of 3. My time is very valuable. I carpool, I drive a Prius, I have solar panels, I believe in the environment. My husband bikes to BART. He takes BART to the city. He bikes to Solano and parks and walks. Everybody who comes to Solano becomes a pedestrian. I think pedestrians are very, very important to Solano. And I also agree with the environmental impacts. And I think also if you asked Albany, do you want more bike lanes, who wouldn't say yes? Everybody wants bike lanes, everybody wants bicycling, but not necessarily there. This past weekend on the rainy day, nobody biked to Flowerland. Beth Thompson, who is Peggy Thompson's children, they came from Kensington to Flowerland. Michael Pollan came to Flowerland. Some people from Marin came to Flowerland.
Can you wrap
thank
up?
you.
Thank you.
After Robert would be Carly Dennett and Ann Freeman, Jennifer Hanson-Romero.
Hi, I'm Robert Abrams. I'm the owner of the Abrams Cloudcorn Gallery. I'm also a member of the Solano Avenue Association Board. I also recently joined the Strollers and Rollers, and I think that they do a lot of very good things. I'm also
Excuse me, could you just get to the mic?
a little closer.
Thank you.
Is that better? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better. Thank you.
So I am a lifetime member of this community. I'm born and raised in Berkeley, worked at McCallum's Ice Cream, worked at Front Row Video, lived on Washington while I was in college, blah, blah, blah. So I'm very familiar with the street, and for the last 4 years, I have had my business on Solano. So first of all, I'm going to start with a question, which is if you want to slow down the traffic on Solano, in my 4 years of sitting on the corner of Solano and Masonic, I have never seen a traffic citation, a jaywalking citation of any sort. I have not seen police activity on the street. If you really believe that the cars go too fast and that they're dangerous, then enforce the laws that are in existence before experimenting with the traffic flow, because to answer another question, I ask all of my customers, where do they come from? Most of them come from Richmond, El Cerrito, Berkeley, too far to bike. And to echo what Carrie said, most of my customers are not basically lucky enough to be able to use a bicycle for their transportation, even if they live as close as Albany High School. They just can't. They don't have the physical strength, the physical ability. And when shopping at places like Flowerland or my store or many other stores on the street, including Safeway, a bicycle just isn't an option. So I'm distressed to hear that, or to not hear in all of the reporting, that there was no mention of the businesses, an impact on the businesses. And my great concern is that when this project is implemented, that it will drastically and badly affect how business comes to my store and to the other stores on the street.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carly Dennett. I own Flowerland Nursery on Solano. I was present at a lot of the 3 of the Complete Street meetings. I'm here as a business owner of over 10 years on Solano Avenue. I'm really concerned by the prospect of decreased parking availability in Albany. When I arrived at work today at 10 o'clock, every spot on Solano, as far as my eye could see in both directions, was full. If the city decides to cut back on parking spaces in favor of turning it into a bike boulevard, where will visitors park? Side residential streets, new parking structures that are to be made in the future, or not at all. Ask yourselves how many times you've avoided certain districts because it was difficult to park. Not every street can be a bike boulevard. What business districts are we comparing Solano Avenue to when we are considering implementing a designated bike lane? If Central Berkeley is one of those examples, it's supported by the entire UC population. Solano is Albany's main commercial artery, surrounded by mostly single-family homes, not densely packed apartment buildings. Revenue from Albany residents alone does not and cannot support businesses on Solano Avenue. We would be happy to do a survey if anybody would like that, to tell you who comes to our store, but I can tell you it's people from all over the Bay Area and San Francisco, Walnut Creek. So anyways, Solano is supported by revenue from visitors from not only East Bay, but also Marin, Walnut Creek, and so on. Many residents who live and support Solano Avenue are on the Hill. Are they expected to ride their bikes to Solano and to ride their bike back up with all the things? Anyway, is the city to reconsider everything in order to make bike lanes, building and devoting existing commercial spaces to parking, changing the use of Solano so that it's no longer a delivery route, no longer a bus route?
Carly, can you wrap it up, please?
Yeah. In the perfect version of Solano Avenue, what types of businesses and how many will be supported by this model?
Thank you.
Nielsen Street, been an Albany resident for like 22 years now. I was a part of this advisory group. Want to say that, bike advocates, people with mobility, sensory disabilities, including seniors, need to sit down together to work out ways to accommodate cyclists that will not create additional accessibility problems. This has to be done before we go forward with decisions about bike lanes. For example, let me tell you, some bike lanes in Berkeley have caused parking problems for people with bad accessible side lifts, and also where they would need to walk across a bike lane to get on a sidewalk, go to a corner because they can't get on the sidewalk. And on Wednesday morning, a friend of mine who lives in Berkeley and has a van accessible vehicle will meet with David Campbell of Bike East Bay to look at a few of these areas together so we can identify problems together and discuss them. But we're looking at problems after they were constructed, not before. I don't believe people's needs aren't being taken into account for malicious purposes. I just believe people that don't have to take access into account don't know that actions they may take are creating barriers. That's why we need to work together. Case in point, there are bike racks along curbs where there is parallel parking. That means a passenger cannot open their door wide enough to maybe transfer into a wheelchair if they're being blocked by these bike racks. A person with a side lift cannot get their lift out because they're being blocked by side lifts. And these were just put in without any thought about anything. About the back-end angled parking, I think it has to be tried on Solano Avenue streets to see if it really could work on those streets. And we need a trial period. In terms of blue zones, I hope that we will still have 10 blue zones as written in the plan, and I really urge that they all be van accessible. That will be helpful not only for people with vans, but people who need to get out of their vehicles and get onto a walker, cane, need to get onto a curb. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
After Jennifer would be Gail Carby-Smith, Sophie Hahn, and Brian Martin.
Hi all, Jennifer Hansen-Romero, a resident, also president of Solano Avenue Association and realtor on Solano Avenue, as well as a daughter who is a merchant on Solano. First of all, sorry everybody for the bad timing. I know some Warriors fans are here. But anyway, I just wanted to say We have already gone through this process. Why are we trying to shake the magic 8-ball looking for a different answer? The consultants have heard from all of the powers that be, including the group that is now offended because they now feel left out. The businesses know their clients. The clients primarily come by what's being referred to as metal shells. But if the biking groups come to Solano, or come shop Solano, sadly they will be disappointed likely because there will no longer be any businesses. They all close down because there are no cars that could come and conveniently shop on Solano. The Solano that was redeveloped below the BART tracks over 10 years ago has been seen by many others as success. Why? Was it because of bicycle lanes? No. There are no bike lanes, but there are wider sidewalks, lower and brighter street lighting, better signage, and trees that aren't covering signage and lighting. This is what that area needs. Do you want to know what this area doesn't need? They don't need bicycle groups telling our community members not to shop at our local businesses because they are now spreading the rumors that these businesses are no longer bicycle friendly. I find it appalling that I've heard this directly from a couple of people today, that they've been told that because their shops are no longer bicycle friendly, that they should no longer shop in those locations upon Solano. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Fun to be on this end. I'm Sophie Hahn. I'm a council member for District 5 in Berkeley. So first, I just want to say that it's really a wonderful thing, the close relationship that Albany has had for a long time with Berkeley, and in particular with North Berkeley. We used to be one and the same. Now we are two different jurisdictions, but we are the same community. I want to take the opportunity to congratulate Solano, perhaps with a little bit of jealousy, for the incredible job that you have done at the western end of the street, from about San Pablo to Masonic. I think you've done an outstanding job, and the revitalization is apparent to anybody who's lived in this area a long time, as I have, having grown up in North Berkeley and been back and forth between Albany and North Berkeley throughout my life. As you know, there was, I think, a miscommunication, and I appreciate having more information here tonight about the collaboration between Berkeley City staff and staff in Albany. Unfortunately, we're a bigger bureaucracy, and somehow the collaboration did not filter up to the city manager or to the council level, and so we had a little bit of a situation where the left hand didn't know what the right was doing, and as I did not have the opportunity early on to engage the Berkeley community that would be impacted by this, and also to consider how Berkeley might really join hand in hand with the city of Albany and find ways to collaborate on this. Sorry, right. Can I have just a little bit more? Yes, excuse me. So there's a 5-block area where Berkeley and Albany are literally linked together by Solano Avenue. And I would have loved to have the opportunity to come in earlier and complement this work. But you've done an amazing job, and I'm very respectful of community process, as are you. And I appreciate that you are quite a bit ahead of us now. I did want to let you know that I have put an item in to ask for funding for a study coming from the Berkeley side of Solano Avenue, and we do hope that we can kind of hurry up and catch up with you, and before you go into implementation and bringing this to any kind of a detailed project level, to have the opportunity to really work hand in hand with Albany, with our own consultation process having taken place, and with a joint vision for that mid-Solano portion. So I don't think the work you've done in any way precludes it. On the contrary, I think it's a good challenge to us in Berkeley to hurry up and catch up and do some of this good work on our side of the line, and hopefully we can merge these efforts together at some point and come up with something cohesive, because this really is a great main street for all of Albany and North Berkeley, and we look forward to collaborating even more closely with you going forward. So thank you.
Sophie, could you talk a little bit about your timeline so we have a better understanding of what you're thinking?
Well, the item will be heard, it's a referral, a budget referral. It'll be heard on the 28th of May. Knock on wood, I do expect it'll be on consent and that it would go forward easily. But then the difficult question is, when will it be funded? I have spoken with the city manager and with the mayor, and they're both committed to doing everything possible to dig that funding out of the budget in our 2021 two-year budget process, which is taking place right now, so it could be as early as June. If that doesn't work out, I'm confident that we would get the money in November when we'll be allocating our excess equity, and we are expecting to have quite a bit, well, not huge amounts, but we are expecting to have some to allocate as we close out our previous fiscal year. After that, with the money in hand, it would be a matter of all of us pressuring staff to move this forward quickly, put out an RFP, and bring in consultants and do the process. So, as you know, with cities, fast still takes longer than sometimes we would hope for, but I do think that there's a lot of will. Certainly from the city manager, the mayor, myself, Councilmember Wengraf, who represents District 6, which is the high North Berkeley Hills above Spruce, and also Councilmember Harrison, who represents the district to my district's south. So on the other side of Cedar, they have all joined in this item as co-sponsors and are showing their strong support for the concept. And I do apologize for bureaucracy on our side having resulted in our kind of missing your boat.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Gail Carby-Smith. I live in El Cerrito. I'm a Berkeley native. My business, Toy-Go-Round, has been on Solano since 1976. I have three major concerns. Where is the parking plan? Where are the cars going? My customers come from Santa Rosa to San Jose, Orinda to Marin on a weekly basis. We draw from everywhere. They don't just come to Toy-Go-Round. They go up the street and shop. They go across the street and buy flowers. They spend the whole day here. Thanks to Solano Association, a few years ago, the 90-minute parking was removed. People were getting tickets. My customers were coming in with their little kids banging on the counter. I can't shop and eat and do all this in 90 minutes. It's so much better now. Where is the slowing down of traffic on Solano? I'm amazed that at the corner where I am across from CVS that nobody's been hit. It's too fast. I go out there and stop the people sometimes so that the strollers and the moms can come across because they can't park anywhere nearby. If you kill the parking, my business, which has been here for a really long time, is struggling now from the construction last year. We're getting ready for more construction. We need more parking, not less. I've suggested to the city several times that we stripe the side streets, not put trucks on them, but stripe them so that the people who are parking in the middle of two spaces can share with everybody. I live in El Cerrito now. The neighbors do the same thing. We've all got to come together. There's only so much parking. There's only so much space. It's a great city. One really important feature, and I can't even go to slowing down the traffic on Marin. I would not ride my bike there. Slow down the traffic lanes we have there. It's great. It's been much better since it got implemented.
Thank you.
After Brian, it would be Tom Newton, Doug Donaldson, and Harry Pruya.
Hi, my name is Brian Martin, Albany resident and recent CERT graduate. I wanted to first read from the U.S. Department of Transportation's website on complete streets. It says complete streets are streets designed and operated to enable safe use and support mobility of all users. Those include people of all ages and abilities, regardless of whether they are traveling as drivers, pedestrians, bicyclists, or public transportation riders. And so, I mean, if this is to be a complete streets plan, then it seems like it needs to be a complete streets plan, and it doesn't seem to meet that requirement. Certainly to me, I would echo the findings of I believe it's the 3 committees and commissions that unanimously voted to tap the brakes on this and study this some more on how to encourage bicycle travel. My children travel around Solano a lot with their friends and to get around town, and I appreciate the added safety benefits, and with the alternative plan that I've seen, that preserving the number of parking spaces that we have, and I would encourage the city to seriously work with this opportunity with Berkeley. Is also, of course, a huge opportunity a huge reason to tap the brakes and do some deeper planning with some of these more recently introduced ideas. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Doug Donaldson. I'm an Albany resident. I think the complete streets plan is a good plan, and I think you should adopt it and adopt it tonight. Would be in favor of that. It's an urban design plan. It was intended to be that way. It's fulfilled its mission, I think, and certainly the one I envisioned for it. The Solano Avenue is our commercial street. It has trucks on it. It has many multiple uses. And the midsection of Solano has not been improved. It is really outdated. This plan is essentially, to my way of thinking, and the best parts about it, it's an urban design plan that will really upgrade that section of Solano, which is a perfectly worthwhile objective of the city to take on. I really like what the plan does in the corner of like Tacoma and where the intersections come in at angles. I really like the work that is going on in the complicated intersection at Key Route, Masonic. This plan comes up with some great ideas for that area. There are a number of pedestrian improvements in this plan. I think the future of Solano as a retail street should be focused on improving pedestrian access. I do not think that Solano should be optimized for bicycle travel. I really feel strongly about that. I'm a bicyclist. I bicycle thousands of miles, a couple thousand miles a year at least. I bike on Solano all the time. In the graph we saw tonight, there's low stress biking, there's higher stress biking. I can handle the higher stress because I'm an experienced biking, and I do bike on Solano. I cross Solano. I can manage that. I haven't had any trouble biking there. I don't think it should be optimized for lower stress riders and to make bicycling easy. That would be a mistake. And I think you should adopt the plan now, and let's move forward in implementing it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Harry Prine. I'm the owner of Solano Cleaning Center at 1219 Solano, corner of Solano and Talbot Avenue. Been there since 1964, so I'm a longtime Albany resident. I've seen Albany made a lot of changes, so a lot of good ones and a lot of bad ones. I'd like to say what Robert said, tap the brakes, take it slow. You mentioned that we're going to increase parking, great, but I also saw 2 other plans that had parallel parking. How many spots would that take away? You don't mention that at all. The refuge points in the middle of the street, it's not going to work. It didn't work on Marin. They put them in, they pulled them out. Why did they pull them out? They don't work. In a perfect world, if we could redo Albany all over again and make the streets wider, sidewalks wider, parking lanes, bicycle lanes, great, but it's not going to, we got to work with what we have. As for parking, I like the idea of backing in. I think that would help my clients along with everybody else. And if you want to try it out, there's an area on Solano between Cornell and Talbot, which is primarily concrete. You could take that out and you could add 10 more parking spots just like that. So it would be a good way to give a little try, see if it works or not. Other than that, If any other parking, if merchants are going to lose parking, nobody's going to come. If nobody's going to come, then the tax base drops out. Simple as that. And, take it easy, spend our money wisely. We spent $15 million on City Hall, and it looks the same. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom Newton. Okay, Bart Grossman, Todd Abbott, and Britt Tanner.
Hello, my name's Tom Newton, and I'm nervous. Anyhow, my wife and I have lived on Solano and Santa Fe, 900 block between Marin and Solano for 47 years in the same house. I've seen some changes. I'm here to speak against adopting any of the bicycle facility options presented by the city's consultants, including specifically the option pushed by the Traffic and Safety Commission. The bike advocates on the commission repeat the claim made by other members of Strollers and Rollers that the Albany's application of the Solano Complete Streets Plan ignores them and is not following the larger Complete Streets plans. I think I read the same stuff. I think the bicycle advocates focus only on the aspects of the complete streets that benefit them. They ignore the fact that it isn't it's a concept, it's a policy, it's guidelines. It isn't a blueprint. We're the council to strictly follow the thinking of the bike advocates to make sure that people riding bikes on Solano are completely safe and relieved of any stress. Each rider would have to have a police escort, I think. What about the stress of crossing the street? We would have to have crossing guards, possibly armed, at every intersection. Before and after school, during the summers, to make sure that our younger Albanians aren't overly stressed. And you want to talk about stressful passage up and down Solano, how about driving a semi-tractor, 2-trailer gasoline tanker, a cement mixer, or an AC transit bus? Again, we'd have to, by strict application of the safe streets policy, we'd have to give them police escorts, and they'd have their sirens on, or their whoop, whoop, they seem to use these days. Anyway, it seems kind of silly. I would ask the council members to reread the comments submitted by Bart Grossman and Peter Campbell. I thought they were excellent. And I think we should pay attention more to the safe lanes on either side of Solano. That's what they're there for your safety, not mine. I'd rather not run over a bike rider. I'd feel awful about it. But right or wrong, they're going to be a pancake. That's all.
Thank you.
Good evening. Todd Abbott, Albany resident, business owner on the board of the Chamber of Commerce Solano Avenue Association. Also part of the Blue Glove crew, so I'm quite familiar with the sidewalks we're talking about. I gotta say, I'm not quite sure what to say about this issue. I really like the idea of bringing additional customers to Solano. That's what the cycle track idea would do. These are people who aren't currently coming to Solano. This would be a way to bring new people there. And I also have to think that this is a new, exciting thing. It would bring, at least in the first year, it would bring people just to try it out. I like the idea. I think we probably all like the idea of promoting no carbon transit of one kind or another, transportation. On the other hand, I am concerned about parking and access to deliveries. We might be able to save our parking, might not, but all of the parking or not. But what about, the delivery trucks that they now have to take their hand cart over 2 curbs rather than 1? I mean, it can create problems. I'm also really concerned about the cycle track interface with pedestrians and deliveries. We have a lot of young pedestrians, a lot of older pedestrians, and the cycle track. It always makes me nervous when I see the bikes going right next to the sidewalk and they have to cross the cycle track to get to this, to start crossing the street. And so I know it's been a long process, but I think we owe it to the city to slow down a little bit, take a little longer, consider new ideas. The choice we make, and we want to make the right choice. The goal about this is to make the right choice. And if we have to admit that we need to take a little longer to do that, then the decision we make is going to last for decades, and it's time to do it. Time to slow down and make the right decision. I do have one question. When the guidance the consultants received, I believe my interpretation is that it was the understanding that the bicycle transit lanes would be Marin and the other side's not Solano. So maybe I would like to see them go back and consider Solano in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, my name is Britt Tanner. I am a traffic engineer for San Francisco, and I was involved in one of the earlier meetings in this process. It was a good process. Unfortunately, I don't think that the plan that came out of it was very good. The plan is really just a status quo. It has the same sidewalk widths, except for at the intersections. It has the same angled parking. It has the same lane widths. And the main improvement for pedestrians is the median islands. However, the median islands actually decrease safety. First off, they end up creating an 11-foot lane at the intersections, but you have a 15-foot lane for the rest of the blocks, correct? So at for most of the block, a bike would be riding happily next to a car, and then at the intersection, they would have to cut into the in front of or have some unhappy interaction with the car. So from that aspect, the medians are actually not safe because they create an unhappy interaction between bikes and cars. However, it doesn't really matter because I don't even think they're feasible. So I mentioned I'm a traffic engineer. I have designed Geary Van Ness Market. I'm the lead transportation designer for Market Street in San Francisco. I have designed bulb outs throughout the whole city. I made a list, more than a dozen. I tried to put median splitter islands on Visitation Valley in Sunnydale in the Bayview area, and I'm nervous. And it wasn't possible. I did the truck turning templates and I could not do it. I had 12-foot lanes. Last night I asked for the turning templates. I was told that they existed. Today I asked for them 4 times. Then I was told that they don't exist. So I am not convinced that the median islands are even possible. If they were, they might be mountable. What is the point of having a median island if it's designed for a truck to drive over it? I am privileged. I'm also going to lose my vision and not be able to drive very soon. So I am going to be using my bike as my main form of transportation. Biking is not being privileged. It is sometimes your only option.
Thank you.
Bart Grossman. Amy Smalllands, David Arkin, and Preston Jordan. No, just Amy, come on out.
You lost Bart? I need Bart.
Hi, I'm not Bart, I'm Amy. As you and everyone who lives and works in Albany knows, Solano is our main street with restaurants, cafe, bars, shops, health and medical practitioners' offices, all sorts of services from top to bottom. It's where Albany residents and visitors eat and shop and work and play and live, and so it's the most important corridor in our town to make safe for bicycling. The Economic Development Committee, with members including the director of the Solano Avenue Station and the president of the Chamber of Commerce, understood this and unanimously recommended taking time to study other design ideas that would make Solano Avenue safer for biking. In my letter to you guys, I attached some links that showed that people on bikes spend more money than in cars, and that safe bicycling facilities attract more bicyclists and their business, as Todd Abbott did mention. Why is that? Because if you ride a bicycle, you're kind of riding slowly. You notice a display and you're riding and you see, oh, there's Abrams Claghorn. That looks nice. Or you smell something from Kim's Cafe. You see someone on the porch of Smith's Pub and you just pull on over and you stop. You know, this is great. You hear music at Rendezvous. The idea that that we should ride on Marin or Washington, a parallel road, doesn't make any sense. It's a detour. There are 2 long blocks. The short blocks are east-west blocks. Long blocks are north-south. Not only is it inconvenient, but when you're on Solano, you just ride and you roll and you see what you see. You don't always go to one particular destination. You don't when you drive or walk or ride. The other thing is that in less than 7 years, Albany Strollers and Rollers has co-funded 66 bike racks co-funded with the businesses. Right here, 53 of them are on or within a block of Solano Avenue. So these are kids' bikes, they're trailer bikes, they're trailers, all cyclists of all ages and ability ride on Solano. Let's make it safer for them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, council members. I'm David Arkin. I live on Stanage Avenue. 15 years ago or so, my wife and I as architects designed a building on Solano Avenue just above Key Route, and in doing that project we switched the angle parking from the current 30-degree angle to 60-degree angle. And we were able to pick up 2 spots by doing that, one of which was an ADA spot. Since then, I've spent 10 years on our Planning and Zoning Commission, and I have a lot of respect for the staff and for the consultants and how much effort goes into creating a plan. But in 15 years, quite a bit has changed. We've developed a climate action plan. We're talking about complete streets. There are bike and scooter rentals. We have autonomous vehicles. We have Lyft and Uber. We have cargo bikes. And just this evening, I saw an electric delivery bike. So I'm a little surprised that we have 45-degree angle parking and no bicycle infrastructure. Now, as an avid cyclist, I bike up and down Solano Avenue and all over, but I think Brooke described well why we build infrastructure for low-stress cycling. You know, years ago, I let my kids walk to Solano Avenue when they were in elementary school. If we had protected cycle tracks, I would have been comfortable letting them ride their bikes, and that's who we're really designing this for. We have the Albany Parkway, which intersects at Solano, and going east, we're covering half of our commercial district. You know, Berkeley presented that they're creating an opportunity to study this further, and in the meantime, it gives us an opportunity to maybe try some things. Windsor, where Opticos has done a lot of work, has the back-end parking and bike lanes. And I'll just finish by saying that, you know, climate change is upon us, and we need to take bold action and be leaders. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
After Preston will be David Petey, Chomsky, and Stephanie Sala.
Good evening, Commission. I think I'll try to address why I brought forward an option to the Traffic and Safety Commission so late as the Traffic and Safety Commissioner. The option that came forward in the February draft plan did not prioritize back and angle parking. In Albany's active transportation plan, it says any project on Solano would, let's see if I can find this here. Any project on Solano would enhance the streetscape design to include bicycling safety improvements. So we've actually heard by putting in the pedestrian refuges, it will not improve safety, it will actually make it more dangerous to cycle on. So it's not compliant with our active transportation plan. Therefore, I saw a problem with the process. I think at the point at which back and angle parking was determined to be perhaps politically unfeasible, what should have happened is looking at other ways to make Solano safe for cycling in order to comply with the adopted policy by this council. That did not happen. So to Councilmember Barnes's point of a problem in process, I see that as a problem in process. Instead of just throwing out the policy that this council adopted in 2012, there are other means to achieve it. I think it's unfortunate this conversation has evolved into a conversation about contention over loss of parking. The alternative I came up with was specifically designed to maintain the existing parking inventory, and that seems to have been lost. I sent staff a specific quantification of parking now and parking under the alternative that I designed. I asked for review. I sent that in early March. I asked for it to be handed on to the consultant. I said, please review this, because who am I? No response. So I would ask you to continue. I think another problem with process you've heard is that the city of Berkeley does not appear to have been entirely involved. Maybe that's Berkeley's fault, but I think to go ahead on the basis of a technicality that they should have showed up would be a mistake when they're potentially offering $300,000 to continue this process.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dave Petey. I am a Berkeley resident, president of the Thousand Oaks Neighborhood Association. We're not taking really a position on this, but I thought I'd come down and say that this is not just a city of Berkeley interest here. The residents of Berkeley, especially Thousand Oaks, are very interested in what you guys are doing. You guys tend to lead the way in these ways. You guys are smaller, a little bit more maneuverable. As Sophie mentioned, we tend to have a bureaucracy in Berkeley that tends to slow things down, but I hope that you'll do it right. And if that means putting on the brakes, I think that does make sense. The Thousand Oaks Neighborhood Association at the beginning of this year, its first meeting was specifically on traffic safety, because we're seeing in Berkeley a huge increase in the number of pedestrian and bicycle accidents, specifically with car interactions. My kid was hit by a car on University Avenue in March, and so it's definitely a very personal issue for me. And I hope that while not everyone is a bicyclist, that we understand that it's important for those people who are cyclists that they can feel safe doing so. And I agree that we, especially on the local level, kind of need to charge forward on climate issues, since we've got a federal government that isn't doing that right now. So we're going to be watching very closely and hope that you guys will lead the way for us to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. I'm Harry Chomsky. I think we had a very good process, and I've been trying to figure out how it could be that it came up with a plan that's not a complete streets plan and that I don't think the city should adopt. And I think there's a couple of things that went wrong toward the end, and I think they can be fixed. I think taking more time would enable us to fix them, and we should take more time and fix them. One is what Preston mentioned, that originally the plan had essentially one element that was meant to make the street safer for riding bicycles and for riding Ford Go bikes in the future when they come, which presumably will be soon, and for riding e-scooters to keep them off the sidewalk when they come, which I think we all believe will happen soon. That one element was back-in angled parking, and it was determined that that was going to be politically difficult. And the consultants unfortunately made the decision at that point to relegate that to kind of a separate project and to recommend a complete streets project that did not include back-in angled parking, and that leaves us with nothing. The 45% of people who have arrived at Solano Ave not in a private car are not really being catered to by this plan. The other thing the consultants did is that when they found that there was additional space because they removed a bus stop and made some of the parking more efficient, there was more asphalt space available. That space was dedicated to increasing the number of parking spaces for cars. And I didn't think that there was a community process about what should we do with this extra space. We have a lot of space dedicated to cars already. We've determined through the parking study that there's actually adequate parking for the people who are using it now. Instead of making more parking, we should have considered accommodating multiple modes. So I think that we should slow down and try to do that. Thanks.
Thank you.
After Stephanie will be Brian Parsley.
Stephanie Sala. I've lived in Albany my entire life. I'm on the Economic Development Committee and own 5 Little Monkeys on Solano. To answer your question from earlier, I also have customers that come to me from Sacramento to San Jose, San Francisco to Pleasant Hill, Pleasanton, and beyond. I'd be happy to provide you guys with a list, if you'd like, of people who shop in Albany that come from far away. For me, the key to economic viability is access for customers who choose to travel in whatever mode they decide to. So I do think it is important to provide access to people on bikes, pedestrians, as well as cars. In my industry, for 90% of the things I sell, price is relative to the size of the item. So for me to sell a high-ticket item, I'm probably having a customer walk out with a really big box. Those are very hard for pedestrians to carry home or for bicyclists to carry home on their bikes. So in those circumstances, I'm really relying on people being able to park their cars and for us to be able to load them in. If I'm not able to do that, I'm giving my customers reason to shop online, and most likely they are going to shop on Amazon. Hopefully they'll choose local businesses, but Doesn't always happen. If you make it hard for, sorry, I already said that. Another point is hiring for businesses like mine has become increasingly difficult, and I've actually had customers quit, employees quit and cite a lack of parking as the reason, which I know is crazy. But if you care about small businesses like mine, like Flowerland, like Toy Go Round, I hope that you'll, and you want to keep us here, I hope that you'll do what it takes to ensure that all modes of transportation have access. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Vice Mayor and Council. Brian Parsley, Albany resident. 2 minutes, so I'll try to swim through this fast. I think we all have an understanding that that people come from out of town to shop here. I'm shocked that the council would not think that, because you allocate $30,000 every year to the Solano Stroll to bring people to Albany to shop. I think we need to, I didn't think I was going to actually say this tonight. I do think we need to slow down or look at another option. I don't think the cycle track is going to work. So I think we have to look for a better option. A one-way cycle track is going to be a nuisance to the city, an attractive nuisance, if you will. You'll be scraping people up off of that cycle track as some people come down and some people go up, and they're going to meet in the middle, and it's not going to be pretty. Sometimes we have to deal with the realities, not the, what could be, but what is going to happen. You are going to need enforcement, which means you're going to have to ask your police department to get out there and actually write people tickets. If there are people driving too fast, they're going to have to get out there and write tickets. But I think maybe a better idea would be to slow down and look at this. I'm sorry if Berkeley didn't know about this, but we seceded from them 110 years ago. I don't think we need to slow down just for Berkeley. And their bureaucracy is very slow. We're a little slow here too, but we tend to try to get things done. Maybe we should take a look at it, but to say the cycle track or nothing is, I don't think, a good way to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it.
Are there any more public comment?
I was just sitting there thinking,
Excuse me. You only get one chance.
oh, okay.
Thank you.
Just wondering why we changed horses in the middle of the scene, from Lower Solano to Upper Solano.
I'm not sure what the question is, but we're going to move on. It is 10:26, so before we move any further, I'd like a motion to extend.
So moved.
Second.
We need a time.
Until 11 p.m.
Okay, we'll start with that. Is there a second? I'm sorry. Everybody agree? Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, council comments. Who wants to start? Michael.
Housekeeping matter. We have three options. We need to close out this grant, or I'd like to close out this grant. Option 1 closes out the grant. Is that correct? Does option 2 close out the grant?
Yes, it will close out.
So the only one that does not close out the grant is option 3. And is there really that much difference between 1 and 2? I mean, this was a high-level plan. We're not being locked into any particular engineering plans or details at that level. So what's the difference between 1 and 2?
If you were to pursue 2, you could give us some specific direction as to, what you would want to prioritize that could be achieved in the near term. It's just an option for council to give some direction for implementation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, let me start. I've always found it bizarre that human beings get segmented into pedestrians, cyclists, or auto drivers, because I'm all three of those things. And so at any given time, in fact, I do all three on Solano. I used to commute to UC Berkeley on my bike. I did it every day of the year that I worked for 11 years, with the exception of maybe one day a year when I had to take something that was too big and bulky for my bike. So I estimate I rode Calusa, zigzag on Solano, and then continue south on Calusa over 5,000 times. And sometimes on the way home, I would go shopping. Typically, I would stop at Andronico's and buy stuff. Remember Andronico's? It's now Safeway Market. Or I'd head further down the street. And on weekends, I would sometimes jog to Solano, and sometimes I'd ride my bike. You know, I'm that guy. I have solar panels. I have LED lights. I can walk to my local market on Calusa Circle. You know, I have a bike. I commute. I ride a bike like Doug Donaldson a lot for recreation. In fact, if you check my Strava account, last year I did 6,600 miles on my bike and 6,700 miles in my 1995 Subaru. So I almost achieved parity. So let me give you an example of something that often occurs. Depending on the type of products that you need on Solano, the issue is not whether I come from out of town or not. The issue is I'm buying stuff that I can't take home on a bike. I never figured out how to take home my dry cleaning and my dress shirts on my bike because they come on hangers and nice plastic bags. I'm not going to wad that up and stick it in my pannier. So I needed my car to pick up my laundry. I like the flower shop on Upper Solano. Sometimes I get cash out of the cash machine there, which is dangerously close. I walk over there to say hi to the owner, and I leave a lot of the cash there. And if I'm on my bike or if I'm on foot, I will say, let's make a beautiful bouquet, and I'm going to have to ride my bike home and bring my car back and park in front of your store and then take that bouquet home in my car because I can't put it on my bicycle. So this dichotomy between, you know, these different people, it's not really different people because I have those tensions inside of me, like, you know, I'm not a good Buddhist. All that being said, like Doug Donaldson, who, by the way, full disclosure, is my appointee to Planning and Zoning, and I think he's great. It's like we say in the bike world, cheap, strong, light. Pick two. You can't satisfy all your needs. So in Solano, it's like bike mode, pedestrian mode, car mode. Pick two. You really can't do all three, I don't think, without, you know, something has to give. And like Mr. Donaldson, I'd suggest this is really not a great location for a bike path of the type that was envisioned by Strollers and Rollers. Very late in the game, by the way. I did check the logs of the participation in the advisory group, and there was a member of Strollers and Rollers at every one of those meetings from the beginning. So I'm a little skeptical that somehow their needs are not met by the process. I just think they didn't like the outcome, and they're not going to like this either. However, I think it's better to keep the cyclists on our quiet streets in Albany, and there are many, many, many quiet streets. When I ride my bike through town, I love seeing kids who are riding their bikes. They're riding to school, they're riding to their friends' houses. We have a lot of alternative ways for kids to get around on their bikes in this town. And we are now living in what I call the Waze world, where cars are getting shoved around because of technology onto roads where I really wish they wouldn't go. For example, Tilden Park, Wildcat Canyon. I go on bike rides a lot in the hills. And there's times now you're on a road that you've bombed down at 30 miles an hour for 20 years, and all of a sudden there's a quarter mile of traffic backed up at one of the intersections. That's like, where are all these cars coming from? They don't really belong there. Waze is redirecting them there because there's an accident on the freeway or something. So my point being that you can, if you do, for example, a bike project of some sort on Solano and it reduces parking, the cars aren't going to disappear. They're just going to go somewhere else. And you can imagine if we reduce parking, put in a bike track, the cars, who will still, many of them want to come to Solano and park, are going to start parking on Washington Street, or more on Marin, or more on the little side streets that are now quiet between Marin and Solano and north of Solano. So what you're doing is pushing cars off of what I think of as an arterial, and you're pushing them onto quiet streets where I think kids should be free to bicycle, because that's the beauty of this little town, is how many streets in our town are good for biking. And this is a common problem. People always, they come to us, we want a stoplight on our street because it will make it safer for kids. And you go, well, if it just redirects traffic to a block that's closer to the school than you are now, how is that going to make streets safer for kids? I mean, there's the cars, the assumption that strollers and rollers and many people make about this bicycle issue is that if you make Solano Avenue more bike friendly and you have to lose parking, the cars are going to just go away. They're not going to go away. They're just going to go somewhere else, and that means on the streets nearby. This is a particularly critical issue due to demographics. California is aging. There are a lot of people who have trouble walking a block or two. It would be nice and respectful of them, as well as the handicapped, to require more, dedicated blue stripes and handicap parking. Do we have enough parking for folks who are going to become less and less abled over time? And there'll be a lot more of us. So I think this plan is fine. I think we spent a lot of money on it. I think you guys did a good job. I think the community did a good job. I am not in favor of altering it to put a bike track there, especially when the consulting engineers thought the plan that Strollers Rollers picked, which was really the least effective. In a sense, it was expensive, it caused traffic congestion, it stranded cyclists up at one end of the street. So the issue of stopping or not, I would like to close out this grant. I would like to do something tonight to close out the grant and vote to do that. I would like to see us consider bicycle options when we go through the active transportation plan. And I will just close by saying, well, there's many things I could say. I have lots of notes, but I'll just stop with this. I worked for a long time on campus, and we still have this trichotomy. Sorry. I need two hands. Pedestrians, bicycles, cars. And it turns out some of us use all of those together. But it turns out they used to be historically discrete objects, right? But if you go on a Berkeley campus now and there's this whole plethora of alternative transportation devices, e-bikes, electrically powered skateboards, these crazy one-wheeled things that the kids ride down the roads at 40 miles an hour and they balance on it, kind of like a Segway without the handle. And for example, in very bicycle-friendly Netherlands, where there's lots of cycle tracks, the statistics are now that more than half the adults are now buying e-bikes, and there are even predictions in the Netherlands that the conventional bicycle will disappear in the next 10 to 20 years. So my suggestion about slowing down and not putting in a bike facility, which involves a whole lot of asphalt and design and is going to be there for decades, is that we don't really know what this new modern infrastructure of electrical vehicles is going to look like. All this space between walking and biking is getting filled in by things like electric skateboards, and then the space between bicycles and cars is getting filled in by e-bikes. And I was up on biking with a friend in Roseville, and there's a cycle track up there, and it says, OK NEV. And I asked him, what does OK NEV means? And he says, it's OK for neighborhood electric vehicles. So there, they let golf carts go on their bike tracks. And there's lots of levels of decision about how this is going to play out. And I've seen e-bikes go up the top of Solano at 20 miles an hour. I'm like, I don't want that vehicle in a bicycle bike path with a kid on a bike with training rollers. I mean, it's a disaster. So I do not want to see any dedicated bike path infrastructure built, at least in the immediate future, because there's a lot of stuff that needs to get sorted out. So if that's putting on the brakes, fine. But my preference is tonight to vote to close this grant. So I guess I'm suggesting that we ought to vote for option 2. I'm not a fan of the bicycle tracks. I think we're still going to need parking. I think this is a good plan. We can vote for option 2. We can close out this grant, and we can move the bicycle planning stuff to the next iteration of the active transportation plan. And that's my pitch.
Before you start, then to go back to my original question, if we were to do that and say it'll be in the next active transportation plan, we would give you direction as to when that would be? And since it's an option, I want to be sure that we all understand exactly what that means.
Well, you could certainly go that way. I think we would want to do a little analysis for you on the range of options for preparing an active transportation plan. I don't think you should make that decision
That's fine. That's
tonight.
But it is something you could bring back to us.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And that would be looking at the entire bicycle network throughout the community and how it connects with neighboring cities.
Okay, thank you. Okay, do you want to make your comments?
Thank you. The hour is late, and I have enough notes to talk till past midnight, but I'll try to condense as much as possible.
I think we all do.
First, I wanted to thank staff and the consultants and the Solano Avenue Association and the Community Advisory Group and the Strollers and Rollers and all the commissions and committees that participated in this and everybody that came out to the different planning sessions that happened. I attended a few of them. I think it was a very fair process, and it was done well. As was mentioned in the report, Solano Avenue is the heart of Albany, and I think in part it's something we're proud of, but it's also in part why this is kind of complicated, because we all have really strong ideas of how, when you're messing with the heart, you got to be kind of careful, and there's a lot of good ideas that I'm hearing, but we all have different perspectives as to what needs to be emphasized going forward. There was a lot of good stuff in the report. I loved like the treatment of Tacoma and Solano, making that kind of a park area. Some ideas around Key Route, and a lot of the design palette section at the end. We can probably mix and match a lot of those things in whatever we do going forward. It will be quite useful. All that said, I sort of agree with the comments that were basically put out here, that I think we need to slow up a little bit and not do a full adoption tonight. I'm not quite sure whether that's an option 2 or an option 3. Just because if for no other reason, we haven't come to a real consensus in Albany as to what we should be doing going forward. And I think if we don't do that, we're just going to be kind of at each other's throats. And I've seen that enough in Albany history, be it the shoreline or the development at UC or any number of other things that we don't seem to get full-on agreement on. So I think, as was mentioned, this has kind of started the whole discussion in a really great way, but I think we need to continue that discussion or keep going in some form or another. Whether that means we should close out this grant or continue it, I'm not quite clear, but I think that would be my preferred way of going this evening. The issues that I have, and I'll put them out here now, I think I'm in my own world, And because most of my opinions are probably such that neither the pro-bike side or bike lane side or the we need more parking side would be particularly happy. I'm at this point, and I'm saying at this point, I'm not so convinced there's room for bike lanes on Solano Avenue. If it was 10 feet wider, I'd be much more gung-ho about that. But I think the actual physicality of what's on that street is makes it very challenging to add the kind of bike lanes I would like to see if we were going to do those. I do like the basic idea of slowing things down, of calming things down, and perhaps in that circumstance you can make biking safer. But I don't know that we can get those kind of total comfort bike lanes on an avenue, at least in our section of Solano Avenue. Berkeley's end, that might be a different story because it does seem to be wider up there. But I'm also a bit bothered by all the parking in this, and I know that the preferred wisdom by a lot of in the Solano Avenue Association is that we need lots of parking. If we don't have parking, it'll kill all the businesses. I'm less than convinced of that. I think that if parking is the standard of what makes people want to come to a place, they'd all be going over to the El Cerrito Mall because there's a lot of parking over there. But people keep coming back to Solano Avenue, and I'm not sure parking is the linchpin for that. I think it's sort of the uniqueness of the avenue, the uniqueness of the stores, and generally speaking, if people want to come someplace, they'll come even if there isn't enough parking or parking is a challenge. They'll figure out other alternatives. Part of my hesitation about this whole parking is, you know, we're trying to come up with a plan and then funding to put it in motion, do the construction. This is going to be maybe at least a 5-year process if we're lucky to come up with all that money. And in the end, we're going to have an infrastructure that's going to be around for the next 30 or 40 years. I'm not totally convinced that parking is going to be so important in the next 10 to 15 years. And it isn't necessarily because people will all be biking or all be walking, but there are other things going on in the world. The rideshare thing, the Ubers, the Lyfts. There's other ways to get around. You know, I would love to see better transit. We don't have the world's best transit in the East Bay. I have lots of issues around AC Transit being very reliable, but, you know, conceivably they might start improving that also. So, you know, I think some of the process goes back to the roots of where this funding came from. It was a Caltrans grant, so the emphasis is going to have to be on transportation and mobility, whether that's cars or bicycles or walking. But there's the economic development part of it was mentioned, but I think it was given somewhat short shift in the report and in the total analysis. I think the grant or the funding thing that came up in Berkeley that Councilmember Hahn put in probably has more detail about the economic analysis than anything we did on our side for the transportation analysis. I think going forward, we need to, you know, make that a component is a bigger part of the total plan, not just whether we have a bike lane or which way the parking is angled. I'm not clear as to what the preference should be on that. I personally would have a hard time backing in, and I think a lot of people would, but that might be safer for cyclists. How much safer, I don't know. Anyway, tonight I would be, I'm advocating that we slow down a bit, that we don't adopt the plan right now, that we get to a point where we can continue the discussion and continue some of these great ideas and maybe come together as a community for something that's going to work in the long term.
Okay.
I can agree with that. One question for staff first, or maybe the consultants, I'm not sure. The removal, so this plan suggests removing bus stops. And how did that come about? Did AC Transit suggest the removal?
Yeah, AC Transit looked at their ridership data on Solano Avenue and based on that information made recommendations for low usage stops to be removed.
Okay, all right. I'm glad that that came from AC Transit. So I don't agree that we only have the three options. We have whatever options we choose. We are the council, we direct the staff to do. I think staff gave us three suggested options. We're free to tweak it. I have a lot of comments, and I'm hoping that I can say none of them, because you don't want to hear me talk and talk and talk. What I hope is what I think Councilmember Moss hopes is that we can continue this. So what I'm going to suggest that we direct staff to do is to, if we have grant money to finish up the grant money and maybe use it to examine some of the details that are being questioned here, like the pedestrian refuges. I hear nothing good coming out of the pedestrian refuges, so I think at least that needs to get removed from the plan, or whatever else staff thinks we could use the remaining money for. And then we wait and we join formally with Berkeley on their study. It's one street. I can't imagine how we would make it better by doing two different studies. I can only imagine that it makes sense to join with Berkeley and finish this plan and the study then. So I have a lot of things I want to say, but I'll stop it there and see if we can get some consensus on that.
Okay. So I'm still, I guess, unclear about the grants. Can you explain a little bit about closing them out and how much, if any, money's left, or how this?
Yeah, so I'll start with, we don't have money left. Right now, we're out of pocket on this, and that's just the position that we're in. In terms of closing out the grant, we have until February 28th, 2020 to bring this to a conclusion. The deliverable that we're responsible for to provide to Caltrans as a means of closing the grant is a final adopted plan. So that is the ultimate deliverable.
Was November 2020, you said?
February 28th, 2020.
February 28th, 2020.
So we have to have a plan that's ready for the next step, which is going for design, right?
It has to be adopted by this council.
Right, but it doesn't mean it's shovel ready. It just
That's
means
correct.
it's designed.
It's just a high-level plan with recommendations. It does not include engineering.
So, not saying we should or we could, not saying we should or we would, but we could adopt the plan, maybe with some minor changes, like taking out the refuges, and restudy it as well with Berkeley. That's certainly possible, as far as I can tell. If we have to fulfill our legal obligation to adopt a plan in order to not be penalized, and I don't know what the penalty would be, but then we can do that.
Yeah, and that would be consistent with option 2, which would allow you to accept the plan. And obviously, we would be working with, in the future on an active transportation plan, and then also with City of Berkeley as they proceed on their plan process.
I am happy to move forward with whatever it takes to keep the city in good stead with the funding agencies, as long as we have an understanding among the council that this is not the plan we really want to have, if that makes any sense.
Right, that's what makes me a little bit nervous about saying, yes, we'll accept the plan, but we know that's really not the plan we want, because just taking the bicycle piece out for a minute, I think, the island refuge, I keep wanting to say refugee, the islands, I think at least 2 of us are in agreement they need to come out. And I think there's some other things that I'd like to look at. I'm happy to do number 2. I just want to make sure that we don't end up in a position that we've accepted a plan that we really didn't mean to accept, because we do want to look at other bicycle facilities and what might work. So can you help me walk me through that piece?
So I think we can consider a couple different options on this. What I'm hearing the council say is that there's some refinement you would like to see to the existing plan so that it meets the vision that you have for the study area as part of long-term upgrades. I think we can work through that however we want to do that, whether it's going through a list or meeting with, if that would be acceptable, meeting with maybe 2 of the council members and walking through that so we have a better understanding. And then we could bring that back to the city council for future action.
And we could still include in that, evaluate the facilities through the active transportation plan.
That's correct.
Mayor, or Vice Mayor.
Vice Mayor.
Both, Mr. Freed and our consultant did point out that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit here. I mean, I would like to see us get started and do as much of this as we can. I don't want this to be one of these reports that we pay a lot of money for and we put it up on the shelf. And so I would like to, go with something like to get to work on the low-hanging fruit that doesn't lock us into expensive, infrastructure changes. And fulfill our obligations in a sincere way to Caltrans, because they gave us this money, they should get their money's worth. But yeah, I agree. I think we all seem to agree that the long-term future is a little murky. But to the extent that we can start on the low-hanging fruit, get this done to Caltrans in a cost-effective way, that would be great. I'm a little hesitant, although I understand Mr. Pilch's point about working with Berkeley, but we can't just sit around and wait for them to get their act together, excuse me. But so I think we have to move ahead proactively on our own, and Berkeley can jump in when they can. So anyway.
Well, so I'm realizing that, pardon, that we have until, you said February, to adopt. Right? We have no obligation before then to adopt quickly. We have, the deadline is February, and February would be fine. So there's no rush to adopt tonight or anytime soon. We have time to think about this some more and do the things that perhaps go in the directions you suggested, Mr. Barnes, and look and see if there's low-hanging fruit to be plucked. But I don't think there's any rush to adopt this tonight.
Can we start spending money on low-hanging fruit without adopting this plan? I mean, this is not.
I think that some of the elements of this plan are identified in the capital improvement plan, and certainly those are programmed through in terms of establishing council policy and priorities for what's in this plan. We would need the plan adopted before we begin implementing.
I think what would help me is to have a better understanding of what we want to leave in, what we want to take out, and what we really are talking about with the low-hanging fruit. I think those 2 pieces would be, I'd want to know those things before I said, yes, let's adopt this plan. And, like Councilmember Pilch said, we have some time, but we also don't want to wait till, January 31st.
And I also want to remind the council, while we do have time, we are out of pocket on this, so any additional work that is pursued is going to be entirely out of our own coffers.
When is the CIP on our agenda?
In the fall. First, we'll go through the budget cycle in June, and then your CIP update will be later in the fall.
And it's true this may be coming out of pocket now, but it's kind of important. So I think it's worth it we try to get this as right as we can. And if it costs us, tens of thousands of dollars more for some extra time to get something that we all feel comfortable with, and the majority of the city, I don't know that we'll ever make everybody happy, but the majority of the city also feels happy with, it's well worth it. I mean, this is, as was said, the heart of Albany. So let's get it right.
And as we look at the active transportation plan, will we be going out for grant funding to do that piece? Poor Jeff. Sorry, I keep asking you these questions.
We'll probably give you some options on that. We don't have any. We recently applied for a grant for an active transportation plan. We didn't get it, so we can look for other opportunities and try again. And if there's some urgency to work on it sooner rather than later, then we would pay out of our current budget.
Okay. Well, it sounds as though everybody's somewhat happy with number 2. Is that the consensus that I'm seeing with it coming back to us so we can kind of fine tune it a little bit, the plan a little bit more? Is that?
Yeah, I would say I was a little hazy on what exactly 2 meant or how to interpret that, but from what I can ascertain from our discussions, yeah, I think 2 might be the appropriate one. But this is with that clear understanding is that there's going to need to be some tweaks on this.
Well, number 2 does say accept the plan as proposed, and I thought that's not, we weren't saying that. So maybe accept the plan as proposed, move forward with short term, at least just to move forward with short term.
But didn't you say we can't move forward unless we accept the plan?
We can't close out the grant unless the plan is accepted.
Yeah, and the closing out of the grant is as far as I can tell, it's a formality. We have to do it. We have to uphold our obligation. Doesn't mean we can't do other things as well.
So I guess, how about this? We look at it, again, making the tweaks and changes that we want and then accept the plan. Is that sort of what you're suggesting?
One of the staff members, perhaps city manager, suggested some consultations with the individual council members to hear where they're coming from, to get more clarity on direction. I'm not sure if I got that right, but I'm thinking that might be the way to go, rather than a lot more back and forth before we know if we can move in a unified direction on this. Or did I get that wrong?
We need to be careful about the individual consults in terms of the.
I mean, we're all here. Let's go.
But one of the things that the council had said recently in this discussion is what we should focus on leaving in, what we should focus on leaving out, and the low-hanging fruit. And I think that that's something that staff can analyze and prepare some sort of summary sheet or other in terms of the comments received to date, things that seem to match in terms of not being well received, and things that are low-hanging fruit, and maybe we can come to some general consensus on what the proposed plan that's amenable to the 5 council members looks like.
And I think we might need a special study session for this, or meeting dedicated to this, just so we can, we can really hash it out. We're certainly not in a good time to do it right now.
No.
So.
Speaking of time, can I get an extension vote, please?
Yeah, so moved.
Time?
Second.
Wait, for how long?
Until 11:15?
11:15, yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Well, I will say, just for the sake of conversation, I'd vote for number 1 if that increases our, opportunity space any. But, number 1, but in general, this is a high-level plan. We don't have to, if there's aspects of it like, the curvature of the bulb outs or something, we're not at that point yet. So if we did number 1 and just accept the plan, how are our hands tied? what does that preclude us from doing if we just accept the plan?
Madam Vice Mayor, if I may weigh in, I wonder if if you were to go with number 2, but instead of using the word "and," use the word "but," accept the plan as proposed, but move forward with planning, et cetera, which would seem to suggest that you're not entirely happy with the plan as proposed, but leaving open the possibility of some other tweaks to the plan as the council has described tonight. I don't know whether that would be acceptable in terms of Caltrans agreeing that the plan is closed out, but if we're trying to wordsmith something here in order to get consensus, that might be a thought. Alternatively, if you accept the plan or accept the conceptual plan as proposed, again, just trying to wordsmith something here that would give the council a comfort level to proceed.
What I would suggest, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
What I would suggest is the first part of 3. Continue the plan preparation to reach consensus, period.
Yeah, I think I would be more it'd be better for me with 3, leaving out the bicycle facilities and draft complete streets plan. Just that's what I'm looking for, is trying to get some better consensus. Plus I would add, the mayor's not here tonight, and I think the more that we have, it would be better to have all 5 of us kind of agreeing.
Well, can we make that number 4? So it's very clear that number 4 is continue plan preparation to reach consensus?
Sure.
Period.
Can I ask a question on that so that staff knows exactly what our next steps are? What does consensus mean to the council?
Oh, gosh.
We don't have consensus on that.
To try to reach consensus.
Number 3 explicitly was not closing the grant. That was the idea, right? So now we're really muddling things up. If we do number 1 and accept the plan as proposed, does that close any options down for us during the coming active transportation plan or general plan update process?
I don't think that it does. I mean, we could accept, if you so desired, you could accept the plan, and if and when we proceed on the active transportation plan or the general plan update, we would be free to take a fresh look.
But it does make it the plan of record that the city council approved this plan, and I don't think we're doing that, so I'm not in favor of that. What I heard earlier was that staff would work to bring some stuff back to us, and we could have a special meeting for this. That to me are 2 things that sound really great. What does the rest of the council think?
I would agree with that. I don't think we're ready. I'm not ready to accept the plan as proposed. I think number 1, is a bridge too far. So, let's, as I said, slow down and, bat around some ideas. We do have some time. I mean, that would be my preference.
And Berkeley might come back to us in a few days and say, "Hallelujah, a miracle happened. We have money," and that it could happen. It changes the ball game.
Right.
How about if we just say number 4, continue plan preparation with staff bringing back, and this isn't the right language, but you're bringing back what you heard tonight, different suggestions, things.
Yeah, and I want to be clear on precisely what I've heard based on your discussion. You're looking in particular at identifying the low-hanging fruit, and I think what I envision that to be is perhaps a matrix where we identify specific items within the plan that would be feasible in the short term and longer term, as well as any temporary improvements that could be made. And then the one big issue that I've heard from at least 2 of the council members is that you would like to see the pedestrian refuge islands removed from the plan.
So, yeah, I think Councilmember Pilcher and I both said that. I don't know that we have full agreement in that, so maybe that could come back as a suggestion that we don't want those.
But isn't that what we just discussed in the last 30 seconds? That's number 2.
No, because number 2 is accepting the plan, and we don't like all the parts of the plan. That's why I think I have the same hesitancy that Nick has, that I don't want to say, yes, I'm accepting this plan, but I don't like these things. That doesn't make sense to me.
But it's not an engineering plan, it's just a high-level plan.
That's correct.
I mean, we could accept the plan and never do the islands, right?
Well, I'm hearing 3 people who don't want to accept the plan tonight.
So if we said continue plan preparation, should we just say period? And
Continue plan preparation with staff to bring back refinements to the plan as directed by the council.
does that give you enough guidance to go forward?
Yeah.
Okay.
So moved.
Okay, no, wait, before you make your motion,
Okay.
do we want, though, to keep the evaluation of the bicycle facilities in the active transportation plan, or is that automatically woven into that?
I think the council has to incorporate that into their motion.
Okay. So would you be agreeable to what the motion is and then adding that others?
Sorry, I got lost in the last part. We'd have to do what?
And then adding to your motion, evaluate bicycle facilities on Solano Avenue as part of an update to the bicycle network, an active transportation plan update.
So I didn't want to open that can of worms.
We cannot, I just.
Yeah, I think not. So here's the deal. Okay, I'm going to say it. It's not being suggested that Solano Avenue be a priority cycle facility, like Washington and like Marin. It's simply being suggested that complete streets be followed and that bicycles be given better facilities like pedestrians are being given in this plan. So it's just, the idea is just trying to make Solano even just a little safer for bicycles. So it's being conflated, putting full bicycle facilities, making this a bicycle route, with making Solano better for bicycles. So that's the big problem I have. We could have had back and angle parking. That would have made it better. Right now, I see the valley gutters making things worse for cyclists. It's either worse or the same for cyclists, and that's not a complete street, and I can't sign off on anything that says complete street and does not improve things for all modes. So I have a problem with this language about cycling facilities, and so that's why I didn't want to incorporate it. I think we can do better, but the details are, I have like 2 pages of detailed notes here, and I didn't want to get into that. So if we can leave that out, I'd be really happy.
We can leave it out, but I'm concerned as to then when it fits back in again.
Mm-hmm. You'd be concerned that we're not considering bicycle facilities.
Yeah, to be honest.
Okay.
And I really want to be sure that we consider all of our options. And I don't want to go into, like right now, what all the options are. I just don't want to end up without that being part of the conversation at some point.
I think that's policy direction that the council's giving in the option 2. It's when the ATP or the general plan are up for, well, it's not up there now, but when the ATP is up for an update, that will be part of the consideration as bicycle facilities or whatever terminology we use throughout the city, including Solano Avenue.
Yeah, so I think, I may be crazy about the terminology here, but if we change it to bicycle improvements, I'd be okay with that. If we say, or improvements to, safety improvements for cyclists.
You're okay with number 2 as long as we lose facilities and use
I'm
the
not
word
okay with
improvement?
Again, the accept the plan, I don't think any of us are okay with.
Okay, so,
Okay with it.
so how would number 4 read then? Assuming that we're
Number 4, okay.
number 4. You don't see it up there. It's in your head.
Let's see what it said.
I mean,
Continue plan.
I mean, I would just add that sentence,
Refinements.
evaluate bicycle safety on Solano, part of the
that's
ATP.
okay. For number 3, right? Or number 4? Whatever number 4 is in your mind. What is number?
And it's getting
You
dark,
have to state
dark
it
and fuzzy
again.
in there. Continue the plan preparation.
With staff bringing back refinements to the plan as directed by council, and evaluate bicycle safety.
Yeah, or with the consideration of enhancing bicycle safety, or something like that, yeah.
As part of the active transportation update. Would that,
I don't know that we want to tie it necessarily to the ATP, although it will
It's
be.
the second sentence of item 2.
I'm sorry, Nicole?
It's the second sentence of item 2, beginning with evaluate bicycle safety, replace facilities with safety, and the rest of the sentence can remain. Council's giving staff policy direction that we will analyze bicycle safety on Solano Avenue and citywide when the ATP is updated.
Does that work for you?
That works for me. Yeah.
Does that work for you?
So the second part of 2 as a standalone item.
It's continue the plan preparation with staff bringing back refinements to the plan. So we're talking about this plan that we're discussing tonight, the Complete Streets Plan, period. Then evaluate bicycle safety on Solano Avenue as part of an update to bicycle network in an active transportation plan or general plan update.
And so this is an option for.
Yeah. It's a hybrid. It's basically that we would bring back refinements to the Complete Streets Plan that you've reviewed this evening, as well as giving staff policy direction that we update the ATP and engage with City of Berkeley with whatever process they may have. It's basically giving policy direction that we continue being aware and planning for bicycle safety, or whatever word you want to use.
What I heard is that we're deferring the issue of bicycle safety from the consideration of the plan, because we're deferring it to the ATP or the general plan. No, and I'm not okay with that. Maybe we have to come back and do this some other time. I'm not sure that doing this on the dais at 11:15 at night, and when we're actually already out of time, is a great idea.
So I'd like to do something, we don't. So can we go back to continue, just the first part, taking out the bicycle facility piece and just say, continue the plan preparation with staff coming back? Okay. Does that work for you?
Yeah.
Does that work for you?
Yeah.
Work for you? Okay.
Works for me.
Can I get a formal motion then?
Can you move it since you said it? I can't. I'm not sure I can repeat it back.
Maybe we can have Ann repeat it for us.
Yeah, to continue the plan preparation with staff to bring back refinements to the plan as directed by council, period.
So moved.
Okay.
And seconded.
Okay.
Okay, Councilmember Barnes,
No.
Councilmember Moss,
Yes.
Councilmember Pilch.
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuaid.
Yes.
The motion
Okay.
carries.
I got that far. Okay, with that, we are just about done. I do want to say I didn't really make any comments, but I do want to add my thanks to all of you that are here tonight and everybody that's been part of this process. It's been a long time, and we're going to make a great plan out of all this. And with that, other business announcements? Our next meeting will be June 3rd. Any agenda items anybody wants? And with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.